Well, as you've heard from Penny's introduction, we have a very interesting guest today. Sarah Jane has written a book that I think more people need to know about. It's called Initiation into Dream Mysteries, Drinking from the Well of Mnemosyne. And Sarah will teach you how they pronounce it in Greece. I don't do that so well. It's a Greek word. And I'm really excited to have Sarah on the podcast today because this book not only tells us a lot about dreaming, but it gives a lot of the history on dreaming. And though I've read a hell of a lot of books on dreaming, I found Sarah's book interesting enough and different enough. And the context of it is such that I think it's very, very useful for all of us to explore what's in the book with Sarah and give you guys a chance to go buy it and read it. So, Sarah, welcome to the Spirit Gym with Paul Chek. I'm grateful to have you here.
Hello, Paul. Thank you very much for having me.
You're welcome. To begin with, Sarah, I'd like the audience to get to know you better so we all have a sense of who you are and what shapes your worldview. So if you don't mind, can you share an overview of your life, your education, and key experiences that led to your passion for dreams and what they offer, and anything else that you'd like to share?
I think really it just came from childhood. I always had really amazing dreams when I was a kid. It was a massive part of my life. I've always been into any film, any TV show, any book that's about dreaming. And I think that became a bit of a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. So, my favorite story as a kid was Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. I liked any weird films that had things to do with dreaming. And I was really into writing stories and drawing and making art when I was a kid as well. So the images that I saw in my dreams, I'd often make into stories or draw or paint them. So what really started my interest in researching it is that when I had my daughter's turning 18 this month. When I had my daughter, I had like a sort of dream drought for about a year where I wasn't getting enough sleep. And so I wasn't lucid dreaming, because one thing with lucid dreaming, most people will tell you is that the lucid dreams that you have generally happen towards the end of your night's sleep. So you tend to have longer REM phases the longer you sleep. And the longest period of REM sleep before arousal, before waking up in the morning, tends to be where you have these like really intense lucid dreams. So I just wasn't getting enough dream hours in, I don't think, at that point. So I felt like a zombie. I didn't feel like myself because I was so used to kind of navigating dream realms, reconciling my life, my world, my experience in dreams, that to be without them for a while just felt like having like in the Northern Lights when they have their daemon cut away. It felt like that.
Yeah.
So once I got dreams back, I was so delighted and grateful and happy about it. And I realized how life-enriching dreams are, and that not everybody has amazing lucid dreams, colorful, intense, like potent dreams. They're quite unusual and special. And I'm really happy that I do get to have those kinds of dreams. So after that, I got more into researching dreams, and I've always been fascinated in ancient culture and history. And then I had been hosting a lecture club I was living at the time in like a small seaside town in England called St. Leonard's, next to Hastings on Sea, where the battle took place. And I started this little lecture series. And I actually have had very little education. I went to drama school. I went to like a really normal comprehensive. And because I was, a bit performative, a bit eccentric, I went to this free drama school called the Brit School. So it was like for normal people to be able to go and do something creative and arty. And I was like that. So it really suited me and I absolutely loved it. But I was desperate to get out of the system, and I didn't want to go to university. And I hate rules. I hate being told what to do.
Me too.
I haven't been diagnosed as ADHD, but probably something like that. Anyway, I can't bear it. Like when I leave a job, I'm like woohooing in the street. Like I find it really difficult, the constraints of like, a regular routine. So I a lot of the stuff that I've learned has been like self-taught. I've always absolutely loved learning. Like even as a kid, I would go to the library and just spend all day in the library. When I left school, I used to pretend to my dad that I had a job in London and get him to pay my train fare. And then I'd just go up and go around all the art galleries and the museums and the libraries. And I educated myself doing that. It was amazing. If I could go to school now, because I grew up in a very working class family, I would learn classics because I can appreciate how classics informs your understanding and knowledge of culture. And I didn't even know classics was a thing when I was little. So I think that would be something that I'd be interested in. But yeah, so I went to drama school and then I started working in the TV industry and I worked in the music industry. I was just always interested in creative things, but I found working in those industries wasn't actually very creative. And then when I had my daughter, I started to work as a music promoter, working mostly with psychedelic bands. I was working at a recording studio and I started to book gigs, like being a gig promoter for these bands that were touring from America, because I've been very into music for a long time. And then when I was pregnant with my daughter, I was like, I don't really want to do like late night, wild, raucous gig promoting anymore. So, and I wanted to learn. And I did consider going to university at that point, but I was very poor and also had a small child to look after. So instead, I used to bunk into lectures at the university campus, like pretend I was a student and go to lectures that were happening at the University of Sussex. And one of the lectures was on neuroscience. And I'm very geeky. I like super geeky, niche, specialist, very precise information. I don't know, I get like a thrill out of it. Like I like watching University Challenge and stuff like that. So I went to this one talk that was by Professor Anil Seth, who was the co-director for the Sackler Centre for Consciousness Studies at the time at the University of Sussex. I'm not sure he still is. He probably is. He's written a really best-selling book. I think it's called Being You. It's got a picture of an eyeball on the front cover. Anyway, I had seen him also give a talk upstairs at a pub because it was becoming a bit of a trend to have these like lectures happening upstairs in pubs and various places. And I said, if I give you 100 quid, will you come to my mate's house and do a talk to like all my friends? And he was like, yeah, definitely. So I started this lecture salon where I invited people that spoke, specialists or super niche things that I was interested in, like sex robots, the science of consciousness, psychedelic drugs, all sorts of weird, like really, like I've got lots of really weird niche interests. And I would have a whip round with all of my friends who lived in the town and make them dinner. And then I would pay the lecturer. And so I started this little lecture salon and it was fantastic. And there was about 30 people that came every single time. And we ended up with this really weird niche, eclectic education we all knew about these super niche subjects. It was really cool. So that's how it started. And during the course of that, one of the lecturers that I met was Professor David Luke, who's a lecturer in psychology and specialises in exceptional human at the University of Greenwich. And he talked about DOTs and like super interested in lucid dreaming. And he's just got funding to do a study into lucid dreaming. And we became friends. And he told me about a sleep temple that he visited with a Mexican shaman. And that's kind of what got the ball rolling, because then I went to look at this sleep temple and I'm very interested in studying things and trying to find out the truth about things. So I wrote a paper about this sleep temple that's in Gloucestershire on the Welsh border. And it was published in the Journal of Paraanthropology and it was peer reviewed by David Luke, who I'd met. And then basically I got a book deal. I started to be the co-host on Anthony Pigg's Consciousness Hour. All the people that I met basically doing my lecture salon became my friends because they're into weird stuff like me and they're a bit weird. So that's kind of how everything's happened. It's been amazing.
It's beautiful. I really feel that that's a real education. That's how I educated myself. I found school frustrating as hell because I couldn't get my questions answered and often got chewed out for asking questions. Same thing happened in a Christian church, which fortunately my mother left and became a yogi when I was 12, which probably saved our whole family in the end. But I'm very much in alignment with that, and my own educational development parallels yours in many ways. So I think what you've got is a real education. So congratulations on that. And it's evident
Yeah.
in your book.
My school reports always used to say that if I wasn't interested in something, I didn't bother, and I'm like, that seems fair enough to me. Like, just
Yeah.
wasn't that interested in maths. Well, I was super interested in history, but not really World War II history. I was really always really into ancient history, but the classics as well do kind of. I'm starting to see how they inform everything. They inform all of culture because it's this sort of evolution and progression. And it's really important to learn about history. And I think it's kind of tragic that kids aren't really learning real history in school.
Yeah. You remind me of a funny situation that happened when I was a kid. We had a large farm, and my parents immigrated to Vancouver Island in 1972. We had a 142 acre working farm, and the local farmers are all friends, and the neighboring farm, the parents of the kids there that I knew came over for dinner one night, and we were sitting at the dinner table, and I forgot the man's name, but he said to my dad, "How did Paul do in school this year?" Because the report cards had just came out a couple of days earlier, and so he had seen his kids' report cards. And my dad said, "Oh, Paul got A's for outstanding in the hall." But I really get a chuckle when I get to meet people like you that took their education into their own hands and followed their heart instead of being cookie cuttered to death.
My best friend, that just reminded me, my best friend Deborah at school, she had the best comeback because we were in drama school, we were just having a hoot. We hardly bothered with any of the proper normal lessons. We were like off making our own films and having so much fun. And I remember I got something like a U for maths because I just drew a little cartoon on the back of the paper. I didn't even look at. I got put in the high set for maths because I was in the high set for the other things, so they just put me in the high set for maths as well. But I was utterly useless at maths, and it was incredibly boring, like really badly taught. And I remember my teacher coming over to my best friend Deborah, and she said, "You've got an F, Deborah. Do you know what F stands for?" And Deborah went, "Yeah, fucking brilliant."
I'm sure the teacher didn't find that too humorous.
Well, I did.
Yeah. Well, that's more important. Sarah, there's a long ongoing debate as to how and why we dream. Some, like Jung, say that dreams are the language of the soul, while those of materialist orientation generally state that they're just brain fodder or that there's not really any significance. Some say that dreams may be performing a defragmentation function, like we would defragment a computer. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts as to why you feel we dream.
Yeah, I don't like this kind of computer terminology that people use to describe the processes of the human soul or mind or body or anything. I think it's kind of weird. It's typical, I suppose, that we look at the material culture that exists now to try to make sense of those like ineffable processes. But for me, dreaming, I was asked this question recently, and for me, ultimately, essentially, dreaming is a sense-making process that we go through at night to try to make sense of ourselves in space and time. And that is on an individual level in terms of making sense of our relationships, making sense of our emotions and memories. But I think on a larger scale, we are part of a living organism, and we are part of a sense-making process that's occurring continually. And dreaming is really tapping into that collective sense-making organism. And that's why I think ancient people were completely preoccupied with dreams being
Important.
tools for predicting the future. Very specifically, like all ancient dream interpretation is totally preoccupied with predicting the future. Like they absolutely believed, and many people do still believe, that dreams reveal the future, not necessarily in a vivid, not a replay, but like a playing out of future events about to unfold, but as an oracular kind of consciousness. And I think AI and the way technology is moving so quickly and in this sort of oracular way as well, AI has this really uncanny, weird quality of being like not quite right. Feeling uncomfortable, like it's predictive, it's making novel associations, it's very rapid. And I think that people will be able to appreciate the oracular nature of um, the cosmos and reality in the future, because AI is a technology that's very sort of sympathetic with that notion that, given vast amounts of information, which the world and the cosmos is made up out of, you can predict likely future events, you can conjure up future images. So I think it's something that people are going to be appreciating very much. And it's something that AI is already used for, predicting the future. The way that our Google search engines are working now is slightly different. It's pulling up information, it's sort of conjuring ideas, and very often those ideas are wrong or bias in some way because of the data that's inputted. So I think it's going to turn people on to the fact that the cosmos is oracular by nature.
What do you mean by oracular? Just so I don't assume everybody else understands. To me, it sounds almost like you're saying circular, meaning from the whole as opposed to a linear process.
Yeah, like holographic, like
Holographic. Okay. Yeah.
yeah, something like that. So everything in the world, everything in the cosmos is a unit. And I think there's a quote, I think it's King Shulgi, who's maybe an Akkadian king. The Irving Finkel writes about King Shulgi, this ancient Mesopotamian king, talking about how he can see the whole universe in the insides of a single sheep, like by doing haruspicy, by looking at an arrangement of things, you can read the future, because the world is always speaking through the things that you see. So, like, for example, I'm super interested in hieroglyphs. I'm just about to start a course that's about, I suppose, not necessarily the esoteric nature of hieroglyphs, but how hieroglyphs can be used as tools to deepen your awareness and understanding of ancient Egyptian concepts. But because hieroglyphs, the ancient Egyptian language, represent real things in the world, there's a much more direct appreciation that the world is talking to us all the time. The cosmos is always talking to us. A scribe who is familiar with the hieroglyphic script can look at a scene, and there may be a configuration of certain objects, and that could be read as a word, like the world is talking to you. And the Egyptian word for the hieroglyphs is Medu-Neja, which means God's words. So I think it's much more direct, much more true to the nature of early human language, that it was a dialogue between the divine and humanity.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Now, I noticed in your description of why we dream, you had a lot about the whole and the interrelationship of the whole, but you didn't really mention anything about the relationship between the soul and dreaming. What is your sense of what the soul is and its relationship to dreaming?
I don't believe, I think the soul and the spirit and the mind and the body are always kind of entangled. The
They
ancient
are, yeah.
Egyptian idea is that the soul and the spirit are kind of separated at death. That's what the opening of the mouth ceremony, there you have a special fish-tailed knife tool where it's sort of ritually cutting away the soul and the spirit from the physical body. But I guess I would say in that regard, I see the nature of the soul and the spirit as being like a density, a sort of a wavelength frequency kind of thing, where a bit like Steiner's idea of the seven realms, that in the spirit realm, you're the finer frequency, the etheric body, the spirit body, that it's about density of matter and of spirit. And that's how the soul or dream body can be seem to be liberated from the self.
Hello, everybody. I sure hope you're enjoying the podcast as much as I am. I got something really cool to share with you. I think all of you know I'm not a biohacking type guy at all. I'm a bioharmonizer. Not too long ago, my buddy Aubrey Marcus turned me on to something really cool called Correct Fuel, and it's a great way to enhance your workout, support your metabolism, and just get more out of everything that you're doing. And not only that, for a product with ketone metabolites in it, it tastes damn good, which is hard to do. I'm super excited about it. And I really love knowing that I can take something that's good for me and good for my body and will help me lift bigger stones and have a better workout and show the young man how to do it. So, Aubrey, congratulations on such an amazing product. What would you like to share with the audience just so they know more about how it works and anything specific you think is important to share?
Competitive athletics has been a part of my life since I was a kid. And there's certain things that we deplete ourselves of when we're sweating, when we're out in the sun. For me, it's pickleball or basketball or volleyball, beach volleyball. So I wanted to start with an electrolyte mix that I really felt captured the main electrolytes like you would get in a normal electrolyte packet: magnesium, potassium, calcium. Replenish your body with that. But I know that that's not enough. I wanted to have all of the trace minerals that come from sea salt. We actually took an extract called aquamin, which comes from the sea. So we're getting all of those trace minerals as well as those core electrolytes. And then adding those exogenous ketones, the GoBHB, that actually give you the ketone energy, which is the second fuel source for the body. So it increases your mental clarity and acuity, especially for, athletic sports where you're paying attention. That's super important to have that kind of mental clarity, as well as physical energy that you get. And to round this all out, we found an extract actually from, green beans that actually increases the body's ability to burn our own fat as fuel. So while this isn't designed for anything for weight loss, it's designed to maximize energy. But like, what if we could put all this together, make it taste great, and then allow people to actually push as hard as they want to push, whether that's athletically or whether that's just restoring your body after you've sweat through the night and lost.
Or cleaning your house.
Clean your damn house. Make your damn bed.
Yeah. Well, I love it. It's awesome. And, I'm very shy, as you know, about anything biohack-like. And I really say you've done a great job with correct energy and correct fuel of bioharmonizing. So I tip my hat to you, brother. And for any of you that wants to try correct fuel, go to korrectlife.com/Spirit Gym. Get 15% off your first order. And while you're there, check out Correct Energy too. Aho, great spirit. Thanks, Aubrey.
You're welcome.
Have you studied any Marie-Louise von Franz's work at all?
No.
Okay, she was Carl Jung's assistant for 18 years and became one of the most famous Jungian analysts in the world. And actually, I like reading her books because she actually explains Jung better than Jung does. She was an expert in ancient languages, and she was the one that translated all the ancient alchemical texts for Jung so he could understand what they were saying and try to make sense of them. But she describes the soul as a rainbow bridge. And, on one end, you would have pure spirit of the void, and on the other end, you would have inert matter. So she gives the concept like a rainbow connecting. So violet would be on the spirit side, and red moving to black would be on the most physical, dense side. And I think that's a beautiful metaphor for the soul. I found, I teach people how to make contact with their own soul and develop a deep, intimate relationship, which falls in line with Jung's conception of individuation, because the soul, the unconscious, and the spirit are all part of a working system. Even the ego, they're really one whole. But I found something interesting is, I've been working directly with my soul probably for 25 plus years. I don't know. It's been so long, as my inner guidance system. And I found that the more time I spend in communication with my soul, the less dreams I have. And so I started looking into that to see if there was any other correlations I could find with others of my students and instructors that I've trained and that have been doing this kind of work for many years. And there definitely was. And they notice that if they get busy and get sidetracked and stop connecting to their soul, that they start dreaming more. And I also learned from my studies of Zen masters and Tai Chi masters. And also I worked with Master Fong Ha, who has passed away now, but he was in the ancient lineage of Tai Chi masters, and he was truly a master. He was a Tai Chi and Qigong master. But one of the things that they say is that the more you merge into no mind as your inner guidance system, the less you need dreams because you're not out of touch with the source of your dreaming self. I just was curious if you'd seen any correlations like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I do 100% agree with that experience, because I do think the more you become who you truly are, the more, well, first of all, what happens is you are the person, you are consistent in waking life and dreaming life. You're like a consistent entity. Very often people that are lying to themselves or confused about who they are, their dream avatar, if you like, is very different from who they are in real life. That seems to be like the first stage. And then when you've reconciled a lot of that, when you know yourself very well, when you aren't in agony, agonizing over emotional decisions or memories, your dream life just seems to become much more kind of gentle and placid. And I have had phases where the dreams have become a lot less vivid and powerful, potent. I very, very rarely have nightmares, and I have not really had nightmares very much since I was a child. But nightmares is one of the things that actually springboarded me into lucidity, I would say. Like, I remember having dreams being a toddler. And actually, when I was working with Anthony Peake and we were doing his Consciousness Hour YouTube channel, we interviewed this amazing woman called Rebecca Sharrock, who's got what's called highly superior autobiographical memory. So she can remember everything from babyhood. She thinks she can remember even being in the womb. And it's blended with, she's on the autistic spectrum. She also has synesthesia. So she has this extraordinary mind where it's almost like memories are color-coded, synesthetic, like multisensory. It's super interesting. And one of the things I was really excited to talk to her about was, I remember having these dreams when I was a baby, or I think they were when I was a baby, where they were just all pure white. There was nothing else. It was just pure whiteness. And I kind of think that's what we go back to, and that's where we're going to go when we die. And I remember as a child thinking, like, I know where I came from. I came from like pure whiteness, and that's where I will go when I die. And Rebecca Sharrock remembers having these pure white dreams as well. And I also remember, as I was a small child, toddler, playing with toys, the first objects that entered into that white dream space that didn't seem to have any dimensions, it was just pure white, were my favorite toys. And then it was my favorite animals. And then it was started to be people. So I think that we know that babies spend an inordinate amount of time in REM sleep. And I think they're doing that because they're trying to make sense of where and why and you know how they're supposed to navigate this realm. It's like if you think about it, our consciousness is uniquely tuned to exist as operational humans on a planet that rotates at a certain speed, that has a certain, you know, we're basically calibrating to that position, even as we're babies developing. So I think that's why we spend so much time in REM sleep, because otherwise we wouldn't be able to process that amount of information. And then as we go through the like dramatic hormonal changes, especially into puberty, my lucid dreams were like wild. You know, I think they talk about poltergeists actually being caused by psychic, you know, mental activity in pubescent teenagers often. So it was a really, really intense experience as a teenager and into my 20s. And then I am noticing myself, I've only done like a 10-day Vipassana silent retreat, but in that time, my dreams were very vivid. And I remember recognizing the kind of Maya illusory quality of them whilst within them. But one thing I decided, like, I love dreaming. For me, it's like creative. It's like being an artist. So one thing I still do, and that keeps dreams happening, is learning things and trying to learn things that are esoteric or magical or symbolic that I don't know, because in the dream space, that's where often I work things out. So I definitely have different dreams now to the dreams I used to have that were more sort of emotional, intense, like very, very vivid, very, very revelatory. Like I have epiphany dreams still if I'm working on something. Like, for example, in the book, I did the research for every chapter, and then at the end of every chapter, I would set myself the task of I want to dream myself into this place and time to have to have a kind of contextualized experience of the dream rituals that were taking place then. And so now I use dreams for enjoyment. When I was a teenager, I remember using them for wish fulfillment. And now I feel like there's definitely this continuity between the unconscious me and the conscious me. So I purposefully dream on specific topics, like people often talk about sleeping on it. And that's how I dream now, is I like sleep on a particular topic. So yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I think the more you know yourself, the more you are comfortable in your own skin, the less dramatic and intense your dreams can be. But there also is, definitely I've noticed growing up, that there's this really incredible spectrum where on the one hand you've got aphantasia, where like you literally people see nothing in their dream, like no visual experience at all. And then other people having what someone would experience on a psychedelic trip in a dream. So there's such a vast range of like visual and vividness and intensity in dreams that I don't think you can say dreams are like this, because everyone's dream life is very, very different. So I think that it's very hard to know, because I remember talking to a friend of mine and he said all of his dreams were in black and white, or they just involved shapes and patterns. My dreams are completely different to that. They're like narrative, like exotic landscapes. People have very, very different dream lives, and people, I have always considered it, because I wanted to be a film director when I was a kid, as like my oeuvre. So for me, it's like super creative. It's making a painting like the best film you could ever see, like with music, with all the different senses involved. Like I can smell perfume in dreams and things like this. So yeah, it's not something that I wanted to let go of, even though I remember doing the meditation retreat and really having this appreciation that it was kind of all illusory. I still love it.
Yeah, I think, that's, it's an interesting concept, because if we go back to Maya, the Vedic scholars, I think I mentioned this in the outline later, but the Vedic, the Vedic rishis, the people that wrote the Vedas, described all of existence as Maya, which is, as you surely know, illusion. But I think, well, I'm trying to avoid getting too complex, but I think if we look at what does the word God actually mean, and that's, as you surely know, a very confusing and contorted issue for most of the world population. But I'll set the stage for what I want to share, is that I define God as that for which there is no other. God is the only being that can create and sustain itself. No other being can do that. There is nothing behind God, so God can only look into itself. In the Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu said, the Tao is deeper than deep, blacker than black. It is older than God. And having studied Taoism and related philosophy for a very long time, my translation of that is that the reason the Tao is deeper than deep, blacker than black, and older than God is because God is an idea that a lot of people manufacture or get programmed into, but the Tao is beyond ideas itself. So if we, when you look through religions, and I've asked countless thousands of people this question to make a point, if God is love, what kind of love would God be? Almost everybody says unconditional love. So I say, well, good, then what symbol would we use for that which is unconditional? Most people, it takes them a minute to think about it, but it ends up being zero, because anything else is a condition. Point being is that for God to have an experience, all it can do is dream. And therefore, the rishis that said it's all Maya were making a statement that I think unfortunately been confused because it leads a lot of people into checking out of life. But the nature of God is to dream itself into existence. And so I bring that up only to say it's interesting because if you take the conception that dreams are illusory, and I run courses on dream interpretation. I've been doing it for patients and clients for a very, very long time. Then a person might fall into the risk of blowing a dream off and not looking deeper into it. Because having analyzed a lot of dreams in my career, I can tell you there's no such a thing as a dream that isn't giving you really important information about something. And it could be something you're creating. It could be a challenge coming in your life. It can be an issue about your health, and on it goes. You know that as well as anybody. But I think that it's, I think what I'm really trying to point out is that when we use that term illusory and we use the term Maya, I have to lean back to Jung, who said there is nothing real outside of a psychic fact or a psychic experience. So if it's happening within your psyche, which Ibn al-Arabi would call the imaginal realm, or Henry Corbin, then it's as real can get. And I think because, as we've already alluded to, we as a human being, it looks like Sarah's sitting there, Paul's sitting here, and here we are, but we're actually alive on all the dimensions that the chakra system represents, which Marie-Louise von Franz's Rainbow Bridge represents. So I think oftentimes the astral Sarah or the astral Paul is communicating to the physical Paul, or the mental Paul or the mental Sarah. And we're trying to integrate these aspects of ourselves. And I think dreams, from my experience, are often trying to harmonize what I might call the truth of our highest self, our spirit, our intention for being here, our social, cultural, and family and religious programming, which can create conflicts in the spirit's intentions for being here, our emotional self, which is inherently related in Steiner's conception to the astral dimension, and then our physical and etheric self, not the AETHER, but the etheric self, the subtle body of the physical body. So I think there's a lot of activity in dreams. And I think it's hard for people to interpret dreams very accurately unless they have a deep enough knowledge of the subtle energy anatomy, the mythology, psychology, all the parts of us that have to be understood together. Otherwise, you get the problem you get when you go to a hospital. You got surgeons that only work on shoulders and surgeons that only work on necks, but none of them know how the neck and the shoulder work together as one system, But anyhow, those are just some thoughts that I wanted to share. A couple other quick things I wanted to share is I've had 3 students. I teach mandala workshops as well. And I have workshops where I take people through active imagination and bring them into a hypnagogic state. And I've had 3 people with aphantasia that can't see any images, but right in the workshops, I've been able to actually identify that there was a trauma that led to that. And working with them right in front of the whole audience, was able to get all 3 of them to see images. And it was very shocking for them. But I just felt like my own experience is that the image making faculty in us is so essential to our own survival, that my intuition is that to have that challenge is pointing back to something that was so shocking that somebody had to shut down their perceptual centers in order to navigate it. And then they don't ever know how to turn them back on.
Yeah.
I was able to get all 3 of these people within about 20 minutes to have vivid images, and then they were able to do the mandala work or whatever. And I've had cases, like you mentioned, of people that dream only white, but I've also had several cases of people that dream only violet. So I'm just sharing with you that, yeah, I'm familiar with that. I'm certainly not one of those people. I'm more like you are, but I find it interesting when people have dreams that are just like sheets of white or sheets of violet, like almost like looking into misty day where that's all they see. I'd in the future, I'd like to investigate that more, but I think that's really interesting.
It's the time of year when many of us refocus and recommit to lose weight, improve our fitness, and in general set new health goals for the coming year. The problem is that typically these resolutions don't last beyond the end of the month. And that's not because people lack information. Most people know what to do, but they struggle because they've become disconnected from their body's wisdom and from their own inner voice. And that's why Paul created Holistic Lifestyle Coach Level 1. Yes, you'll learn the fundamentals of breathing, eating, moving, sleeping, drinking, and thinking. These are the 6 Chek Foundation principles, which are guided by the 4 doctors: Dr. Quiet, Dr. Diet, Dr. Movement, and Dr. Happiness. But more importantly, HLC1 is not just another course or program. It's a powerful immersion to help you get in harmony with your unique design. It's practical, it's experiential, and it's deeply transformational. So join us this March at the Rainbow House in Southern California for 3 days led by Angie Chek. If you're a coach, a practitioner, or someone simply ready to take ownership of your life and your health, this is your next step. Spaces are limited as we keep the group small so everyone gets personal attention. Visit paul.chekinstitute.com for more details and to claim your seat. That's paul.chekinstitute.com to sign up for Holistic Lifestyle Coach Level 1.
I think aphantasia fascinates me. Some people have aphantasia when they are trying to conjure up images whilst awake, and then they'll still dream and they'll have dream images. But then some people, it seems to be across the board, and you're right, it often correlates with some sort of traumatic event. And very, I think for me, it's almost like a sort of soul closing the eyes and not wanting to see something horrifying, and
Yes.
those eyes remain shut. And then I have, I had some very, very interesting experiences with meditation, with seeing geometric forms and violet colors, especially, actually. But I'm really interested in the kind of light and the kind of colors that we see in dreams quite often, because the dream world for me, and like I say, dream's very different for everybody, but the dream light for me is a light that comes out of dream things that isn't produced by like a sun. So to me, it hints at the dreams being in that same place. The underworld was considered. The unconscious is the underworld, and the things of the underworld are sort of self-illumined, and they aren't illuminated by the light of the sun. So there's this strong correlation for me with that kind of journey through the underworld of being the same as that journey every single night into the realm of dreams and waking up in the morning. And that's symbolized really beautifully in ancient Egyptian symbolism, where you have the head of the dreamer being almost like the sun rising again over the horizon every morning. I made that my logo because I'm really interested in the magic of symbols and how symbols work on the unconscious in a unique way. And that's one of the main tools that I use now, and why I'm so fascinated with hieroglyphs is that they work as these tools to kind of unlock ideas without being verbal, without being abstract, without being words even necessarily. They have this multi-dimensional meaning.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious, are you familiar with the term black sun or lumen natura from alchemy?
Yeah.
In my studies of the black sun and the lumen natura, which is for the listeners, it's the inner self-luminous light that emerges from everything in nature, from rocks to trees to living things. And in my studies of alchemy and the black sun and the lumen natura, I felt so interested and inspired by it. I asked my soul to please guide me into the ability to see the lumen natura, so I could understand it better. And I was given just an amazing series of visions, which I can see inside of myself now because I'm clairvoyant. So sometimes once my soul shows me things, I know how to see them, you know? And what I saw was really fascinating. And, you know, we have now got quantum biology, and we've got all sorts of advanced science. And I've studied the original work of Fritz Albert Popp on biophoton emission. But what I saw goes very hand in hand. There's a book by a healer in New Zealand I read many years ago. I think his name's Arnie Lode. But he describes how the Tibetan monks had a habit of dissecting bodies when they died for a very long time. And over 900 years ago, they had identified through their own inner vision all the meridians of the acupuncture system, and they could actually see. And they said that when the sperm met the egg, very quickly, the entire fetus formed, and it was the subtle energy body with all the acupuncture meridians. And so what my soul showed me, and what I remembered from studying that and from seeing by looking into myself clairvoyantly, is that the lumen natura is like the light framework that the single cell of the sperm and the egg begins to divide, and that creates the matrix so that the cells know how to become eyes, teeth, skin, hair, and everything else. And in this sort of dreamlike experience we're having, I saw that the lumen natura is really like what is classically referred to in Greek philosophy as the logos, that the sun's projecting this logos, which is the matrix within which the material forms are really sort of, it's kind of like if you build something out of plaster and you make a wire frame for it first, and then you plaster the face and you make it all look just like a human being, but there's actually a wire frame. It's not solid plaster. My mother's a very successful sculptor. You might see some of the sculptures behind me. And so the lumen natura, I think, is really like that framework. And I think our dreams are somehow showing us this inner light, this inner framework to help us see maybe where we might fall through the cracks, as a metaphor.
I do think dreams have this real quality of trying to tell us about our true nature, like trying to communicate something with us. And maybe as we get older, we forget, or we don't want to know, or we get too grounded in this ordinary material reality. But I think for me, I very much think of that with regards to, you're talking about the soul trying to find this equilibrium, this harmony. And that for me is really, really exemplified in the idea of Ma'at, this idea of cosmic harmony and order. And in the Greek tradition with Aegea, the daughter of Asclepius, who she's called the goddess of health, but her name, Aegea, was a greeting that Pythagoreans used. And it means wholeness, soundness, completeness. It's the humours in balance. It's everything in order and complete. And it's you returning to your original divine blueprint, which is that light map that you're talking about. It's like every seed contains within it a light code that has come from the sun, because we are beings that are programmed by the sun as a god, as a creator entity. And so all of that knowledge is enclosed in that seed, that when you're born, you have this kind of blueprint of how you can harmoniously develop. And it isn't about, as you get older, it isn't about being perfect, being really fit, being really beautiful. It's about being the best, most harmonious version of yourself in the universe. And that's beauty, and that's happiness, and that's joy. And you could drop down dead tomorrow, but if you're experiencing happiness and joy and oneness with the universe, it just doesn't matter, because you're just going to continue being part of the universe.
Absolutely. It's interesting you brought the seed up, because when I was doing this investigation into the lumen natura with my soul, one of the visions that it gave me was different seeds. And it showed me an acorn, and then I could see the light of the oak tree, the whole oak tree so if the seed was the size of an acorn, like the tip of your thumb, then the what I saw was like a holographic image of the oak tree, but it projected maybe 2 or 3 inches off either side of the tree. So it was like it was already there, calling the seed forward, just waiting for the right amount of water, warmth, and environment to trigger the activation of the seed, which happens when the phytic acids break down due to water exposure.
Well, it's all there, isn't it? It's all potential. And someone said something really interesting to me recently, that I'm writing a new book at the moment about the relationship between Asclepius and the Egyptian traditions of dream incubation, and how concepts of healing come through Thoth as a god of time and cosmic order, and how Thoth's name relates to this perception of time as a force and could be manipulated to instigate healing. So a friend I spoke to, she works with a lot of indigenous healers, and I was talking about how the ancient Greek concept of healing in an Asclepian sanctuary is about moving out of mortal, ordinary linear time into divine space and time, where you can return back to the place before you got ill, before you started your you return to that state before all the disorganization and the chaos started happening. That's the blueprint. That's like your divine path or map, like light map, like. And she was saying that the indigenous healers say the same thing, that they take you back imaginatively to a time before you ever got ill. And when you can exist in that time, you aren't ill anymore. And that she's seen this work. Spontaneous faith healing responses are a fact. Placebo effect is a fact. Yes. And rather than discount that as just the placebo effect, we surely have to recognize that this is something that's possible. I had a dream about being visited by the Zoroastrian god of light, Ahura Mazda.
Yes.
And in this dream, I was standing on the little landing that was outside my bedroom door as a child. And Ahura Mazda came down from the sky, and he's a god of light. He's the Persian god of light. And one of the things I love about lucid dreaming, or dreaming in general, is this weird expansion of perception that you have. So you can see close up and far away at the same time, simultaneously, and yet you're able to experience all of it. And you have multiple points of view. It's like the whole universe is eyes, and you're in every atom of this other world. So in this dream, Ahura Mazda came down from the sky and stepped into my body as a being of light. And then I could see close up, and I could see my DNA spirals untwisting. So they became ladders, and he stepped down my DNA, and every rung as he stepped on it lit up, and I could feel the light in my body, and I felt irradiated with his light, and I woke up and I felt amazing. And one of the things that I'm super interested in and that I research is what is the actual mechanism of spontaneous healing that can occur in I think a lucid dream state is basically the most optimum, perfect state to be in, state of consciousness to be in, because it is recognized as a bona fide, particular, unique state of consciousness. It's the ultimate foundational state to be in to experience faith healing, spontaneous healing, because you've got this like fantastic, unique entanglement between like awareness, you're knowing what's happened, you're having like a full body response to dream phenomena. You absolutely believe it, and it feels completely real. Lucid dreams feel often realer than real.
Yes, they do.
And your body also is in a state of sleeping and dreaming, where you have the genes switched on uniquely in sleep that you don't have during wakefulness, that are implicated in homeostasis. So your body is in this absolutely like prime, fantastic condition to be going through those processes of cell regeneration, of balancing hormone levels and all this kind of stuff. So it makes sense that the dream works really well for healing, and that I've spoken to people before, because we know they were using opium, they were using certain plant medicines in the sanctuaries. And I don't think it's necessary in every single case that's required. I've never taken any psychedelics, but I have amazing dreams. And I've had dreams that feel like my life has completely changed when I wake up from them. They're extremely intense. And I could be crying or laughing, or really, really different emotional, potent dreams that have changed my life. I think that the dream can come spontaneously like that to someone just naturally without any substances whatsoever. And for other people, maybe when they're breathing in the smoke of opium, they see Therapeutae dressed as the god Asclepius. They're surrounded by serpents on the floor. They believe in that opium cloud state, that the god is operating upon them. And belief is a huge part of recuperation and getting better. Feeling good and feeling happy and feeling confident is one of the biggest factors in like survival rates of serious illness. And many conditions can reverse themselves, or can remedy themselves given enough time and the right kinds of conditions. And I'm a huge advocate as well for like the power of beauty and the power of nature to heal people. And I think we're forgetting, because we're building these horrible, ugly hospitals that are full of artificial strip lighting.
And cities.
Cities, horrible smells, like the smell of pollution, the constant vibration and the noise of traffic and cars. And you look at the Asclepian as like the kind of ideal healing environment, where it's this beautiful, quiet, still place surrounded by mountains. It's you put a person into a healthy, clean, harmonious, peaceful, beautiful environment, and they're likely to thrive. You put someone in a ugly, horrible, smelly, unpleasant, vibratory environment, they're not likely to thrive. It's like, how could we have forgotten that beauty heals us? Like, I don't understand it. It's so obvious.
Well, you know the old saying, it's hard to change a man's opinion when his paycheck depends on it. And there you have hospital administrators that are not really interested in curing diseases. That's why they call the medical system a disease maintenance system. There's no real profit in helping people heal. And COVID was just a glaring example of exactly that. You reminded me of something when I teach my students in pretty much all my classes. I remind them that to remember the word believe equates to be live. So whatever you believe becomes live within you. And that's why we have to be very conscious of what we believe. And I have a very extensive course material on how to analyze your own beliefs. And I think how that relates to dreaming is, I think dreaming is often showing us where our beliefs need to be challenged, or where they're potentially limiting us or even harming us. And, for example, having Ahura Mazda come to you in a dream, and the experience you just described could not only trigger you to investigate Zoroastrianism and learn more about it, but it can bring you into touch with an aspect of the divine that may have been previously out of your whole contextual field. And all of a sudden now you have a new relationship with God or with Source that comes by way of that dream and that experience. And that could, a person having that dream that maybe was caught in a dogmatic Christian or any religious system, could all of a sudden authentically begin to question their beliefs and see where those things might be untrue or limiting them. So I think there's just another example of where our dreams can actually be the spirit or the soul trying to protect us from the rigors of navigating the earth plane.
Hi, everybody. I know that you're all aware of the importance of vitamin C. There is a mountain of research on it, but not all C is created equally. I love Paleo Valley's Essential C Complex because it is the real deal, bioavailable. And I wanted you to hear right from Autumn Smith, founder of Paleo Valley, why their Essential C Complex is so unique and something you definitely want for your family and your children. Autumn, tell us about your Essential C complex.
Well, I was shocked to learn as a holistic nutritionist that 90%, over 90% of the vitamin C on the market is derived from genetically modified corn, and then it's processed with highly volatile acids. And so I knew I had to find a better way to get all of the powerful benefits of vitamin C. So what I did was I dove into the research and I found the 3 most vitamin C rich superfoods on the planet. That's unripe acerola cherry and camu camu and amla berry. And then I just packed them into capsules. And the benefits are amazing because you're not only getting vitamin C, but all of the other wonderful benefits that come from these amazing superfoods.
To get your Paleo Valley Essential C to help support a healthy immune system and get 15% off, go to paleovalley.com/Chek15. That's paleovalley.com/CHEK15 for a 15% savings.
I feel like in the last few years, I have just made this conscious decision to follow my dreams and to follow my dreams in a very, I've always felt like my dreams are calling me somewhere, like trying to tell me something about something I've got to see or somewhere I've got to go or people I've got to meet. And it just happens. I followed my dreams to Greece. I had Asclepian dreams. I followed my dreams to Greece. I've actually met someone who I've been working with, who is an Iranian Sufi mystic and who's just bought a factory in a suburb of Tehran, and he's developing it into a therapy treatment center. And it's this beautiful, like Paradise Garden style old factory that he's turning into this therapy center. And I have had dreams about Zoroastrianism and fire temples and holy springs a lot. They're kind of my main dream themes. And recently I came to Istanbul for the first time. And the moment I saw it, I know I've been here before. Like I've dreamt about it a lot. I recognize places. It feels like all of my favorite things I've ever loved are all here in one place, and down to the nichest, weirdest everything. Like I can't believe it. All the plants, all the herbs that I've ever loved, all the kind of rituals that I've ever loved, all the things that it just makes sense to me. And I remember the first time I stepped off the tram here, I was like, I've definitely been here before. Like I must have had a past life. And I got a message from someone at Instagram, saying, "Oh, I'd really like to meet you. I saw that you're in Istanbul." And I met up with her for coffee, and she was a past life regression therapist. So it just feels cool. Like I'm just like handed this information. And when you follow it, amazing things happen. It's like choosing a different way to live. You know, the people that come on the retreats, they often have had a dream about how they should come. And so they come. And then we let the dreams lead the retreat a little bit. So there's some flexibility there. So when things will happen in people's dreams, we can act them out. And then it creates this continuity between dreaming and waking, where you start to feel that you actually we are in a dream. We definitely are dreaming all of this. Yes. We're part of this big cosmic divine dream. And we should just be playing and loving and enjoying it and appreciating the ridiculousness of it. And I'm completely committed to that now. I can't think of any other way of living. It makes so much more sense than like working for the paycheck, like you say.
Well, it does. And I think what's also really important about what you're sharing is that, one, I find it takes most people a fair bit of life experience and often pain and challenges to get to the point where they realize they have to look into their own role in creating the events of their life instead of playing the victim or the saboteur or projecting it. You know, it's always somebody else's fault. I think once a person reaches the point where they realize that they're 50% of every relationship and they've got to start taking ownership for that, then there's a genuine looking inward, a real genuine interest in the self. And what I think is so important, so true about what you're saying is ultimately what you've just described goes hand in hand with almost all the ancient traditions that are telling us how spiritual teachings prepare us for the afterlife. You know, Steiner said that the function of spiritual practices is to develop the subtle organ for each of your physical organs, without which you will be unconscious, blind, and deaf when you die. You will just wake up in another body and not know how you got there. So ultimately, what you've just described is as we learn to live that way, and we can come in contact with things like the Lumen Natura, and we can come into contact with the profound nature of lucid dreaming and even psychedelic experiences, I think we start closing the gap between our conception of what it means to be alive and what it means to be dead. My research into this, both in extensive study, but also in myself, has shown me that there actually is no death, that there is nothing but life in God, because all God's dreaming is life itself, because there's nothing beyond God's dreaming. And so just like we go to sleep at night, we have a mini death every night.
That's exactly the conclusion that I've come to. And I think that that's what's represented by the rod of Asclepius, is that life and death are actually always entwined. We're living and dying in every moment, in every microsecond.
Yes. And
therefore, death is nothing to be afraid of, because in the grand scheme of things, it's like a blip in our consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And they're twins, in the Greek mythology, Hypnos and Thanatos, sleep and death are twins. And so I think there is this similarity, and we can learn to navigate the death realm when we dream. And I remember as a child, because my dreams were so intense, and also when I was a kid, I dreamt pretty much in this other world, in like a very clear other world. It was navigatable. I could draw a map for it. I would go somewhere and I could tell you where it was in relation to other places on the map. It was like a other world. It wasn't dreams like a series of vignettes. It was like this other place. And I'd go there still now sometimes. And so for me, it seemed obvious that this is where you go when you die. I was absolutely sure of it. And so as a child, I wanted to be able to cultivate that lucid awareness. So I was sure that I could lucidly navigate life to dying, and I wouldn't lose consciousness, and I could go into the other realm, and that's where I'll go. And so I still have, I cultivated, because I had this really interesting dream experience as a child. I cultivated a lot of kind of philosophy around it, a lot of thinking and metaphysical ideas that, I remember going to an outsider art exhibition a few years back, and I remember drawing a picture of a spider's web and conceptualizing my idea of reality and I did this as a child, of like a spider's web with beads of dew on it, and everything's connected. The spider's web is kind of God, and the beads of dew are individual experiences on that grand net. And every bead of dew reflects the entire spider's web and runs into every other bead of dew. And I just always naturally thought of this like interconnectedness, eternal nature of the soul. And I always thought dream skills were a way of navigating that and making sense of that. And so I've always been interested in those kinds of philosophical ideas.
I think they're very, very important. I think one of the things that the standard education system has done is actually brought our minds into such narrow, limited focuses that we don't anymore not only connect to nature, but really view our dreams as real and important. So I think what you're describing is this capacity for the psyche to open the veil between dimensions. Are you familiar with tarot at all?
A little bit, yeah.
Well, Tarot 7, the Chariot, it shows the charioteer standing in the chariot, and the canopy is the stars.
That's my card.
Oh yeah, good. And so I painted it. I painted it. My soul gave that to me for my yearly mandala a couple of years ago. It's on the wall back there. But the without a long explanation, but the point is that the Steiner says that the chariot archetype represents the embodiment of Christ consciousness. The sphinxes represent the polarities of consciousness, the feminine or yin and the masculine or yang. But the canopy being pulled apart is the sign that as the charioteer grows spiritually, and the armor on the charioteer is not to protect him from external threats, but it's to learn to manage the charioteer's own internal programming and threats from its own belief systems. But when the charioteer is in a balanced space, the canopy opens up. So the charioteer has the ability to peer beyond the veil of Maya. The canopy's still over the roof, but in the front it's open. So it's showing that the charioteer is beginning this process of realizing that he or she is much more than just the physical world around itself. And then ultimately, you get up further along in tarot, you get to tarot 17, the star, and she's really the hermit in a much more advanced stage of development. And she's consciously working with the unconscious and the conscious. And then, I could go on and on, but I think that the dreams are helping us if we pay attention to them and don't just see them as artifacts or as, somebody that threw a comic book into our head or some excuse, but really pay attention. I think we're really being guided to open the veil.
I think so too.
To really experience that we are not only one with the stars and one with nature and one with everybody else, but we're one with all that is, and that we're each a unique expression. When you talked about the dewdrops on the web, that's exactly what the myth of Indra's net is all about. Are you familiar with the myth of Indra's net?
I am now, yeah, but not when I was a little kid.
Yeah, well, it's exactly that, and it's a really, if you really look at that and you go, I don't think there's a better conception for what's actually going on here. And when it comes to dreaming too, it's not unusual for people to be surrogates and dream for other people and bring them messages because they're just too shut down or blocked or too tired, or maybe they're using things that are blocking, like tobacco and marijuana, both block dreams. So especially if you smoke it in the evening, it tends to block dreams, because many of the professional athletes I work with end up with problems from using marijuana for pain management so much. I have to put them in detoxes, and they'll often come back to me and saying, "Oh my God, I'm dreaming like crazy. I haven't been dreaming for a long time." I said, "Yeah, it's because the marijuana is out of your system now." And so there are factors like stress, sleep deprivation, and certain drugs that do block our ability to dream. But the point I'm making is just simply that I think that, what I've learned from my life of spiritual practices, when I try to guide people into, is the realization that you're an absolutely, utterly novel expression of the divine, and that you're here to share a genius that is an important piece of the cosmic puzzle that only you carry. And I think our education system and all the pressures to constantly make money just to try to survive are really blocking us from embracing the uniqueness of ourselves. And we get, I can give you a perfect example. I teach art therapy and mandala workshops, and I'm an art therapist. And so many people will sit for hours and stare at an empty canvas. And I've had men just in tears for hours because they couldn't get themselves to put anything on the canvas. And every single case, which is many, it turned out to be that when they were a little kid, somebody criticized their art, or their mom or their dad told them that, they shouldn't waste their time scribbling like that and go do something useful. Or they went to art school and got so much negative criticism, they just gave up on themselves. But in every single case where a person couldn't express their creativity artistically, it was coming from a wound. And I think that if you take that art as an example of our ability to access the genius of the soul within, we've created this industrialized environment which I'm concerned AI is actually making worse in many ways, where we're so externalized that we don't actually spend time in and with ourselves enough to realize the absolute magic and mystery that is living right inside of us. We get pushed. I call that externalization of the soul. And
I couldn't agree more with that. I think it's like Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, this idea of like 0 point, or this kind of layer of the noosphere, which is like information. We're like full of information,
mind
but we aren't connected to that divine.
Right.
This is this idea of the genius or the daemon, and I think it's one of the things that because like I was telling you before, I was incredibly creative when I was a kid. I was always writing stories, drawing things. A lot of kids these days just work with computers for everything. It's one of the things that I use for dream interpretation is I tell people, like, never write it down on a phone, never talk it into a phone, always write it down with pen and paper or pencil and paper, because something different happens. Like, I really believe also that the hand and the brain are connected in unique ways that we can't appreciate. And when you think about the motions that you're doing when you're texting, it's completely different to writing, and your fine motor skills and the little micro movements that you're making, they're all associated with brain regions that have interconnections. And I think it's really, really vitally important. And I think that what you got out there is exactly what's kind of causing this like lack of dreaming and lack of inspiration in so many people. Because as children, it's one of the things that I absolutely love doing on the retreats. And people always say when they come on the retreats, I didn't expect you to be like this, because we do loads and loads of things that are just about trying to access that very imaginative childhood play consciousness that existed before we became grown-ups. Like, we'd play loads of really, really silly games, and we do loads of art and loads of drawing. And I see as well that lots of people don't draw as much as they used to. Like, I used to draw all the time, write all the time with a pen and paper. I love it. So I'm doing this hieroglyphic online workshop, and I'm trying to encourage everyone to get like beautiful writing and drawing materials because the scribal arts are so essential for this understanding of your own memories. I think something totally different happens when you write down a dream using a pen and paper in comparison with using a phone. It's like the Mesopotamians, when they talk about dream interpretation, they often talk about untangling the knots. And I think there's something about physical writing that untangles the knots of dreams 100% more effectively than typing or speaking it. And most ancient interpretation looks at words and wordplay, which for some reason just is so much more effective when you write these things down. It's like you unlock, as you're writing, you unlock other memories, more information. It doesn't happen with digital technology. I also think there's something really detrimental about the way people are looking at screens and scrolling. The eye movements, the rapid up and down eye movements that are associated with scrolling are completely unnatural and totally different to looking into a real depth of field, real experience. And so those kind of rapid eye up and down eye movements are associated with trauma, with experiencing traumatic events. So I think just by the nature of this technology, we're accidentally thinking like we're going through the motions of being traumatized, even though we might not be. But we're going through the physical motions of traumatized experience, which is causing a kind of dream blindness. So I think these exercises where you're looking into nature, and I think what you mentioned about nature is really important, because although I didn't grow up in the countryside exactly, I grew up next to this big field and park, and I spent every moment of my childhood like closely observing nature, like looking at frog spawn. And nature tells you that everything's interconnected. It tells you that there are these patterns and there are these systems and there is interrelationships. If you observe nature as a child, that is hardwired into your being. You know it. And I think I meet a lot of children these days and adults now that don't know anything about nature, have never spent time in nature at all. I work with children quite a lot. I worked with the schools. They don't kids don't know what berries they can pick when they go out for a walk. You know, they're completely shut down and separated from the natural world.
But they know how to run an iPhone at 6 years old better than an adult.
And use the remote control and all this kind of stuff. Yeah. And also, I mean, there's that sad thing about how they can recognize 250 brands and no types of leaf or no types of bird. You know,
yeah, that was your famous British chef. What's his, isn't it?
Jamie Oliver.
Jamie Oliver. Yeah. I saw him do it right on stage. He had flashcards with corporate logos, and then he had common fruits, vegetables, and farm animals. And I think it's been a long time, but I think 90% of the children got every corporate logo right, but over 50% of the children could not recognize a single common fruit, vegetable, or farm animal. Now that is a problem.
I hope you guys are enjoying the podcast. I sure am. By now, most everyone has heard of the healing power and wide variety of nutritional benefits we gain when taking Shilajit minerals. As good as it is, it doesn't taste good at all. Imagine eating rotting rocks that have passed the due date. You're probably about right. But there is an exceptional way I get my daily doses of Shilajit that tastes fantastic. That's Organifi Shilajit gummies. The texture and consistency of the gummies is excellent, and they have just enough natural sweetness to make me feel like I'm getting a lovely, healthy treat that both my body and mind can enjoy. The only problem with Organifi Shilajit gummies is that you have to hide them when friends are around, and the kids too, or you'll go through 2 bags in no time. Shilajit is a unique mineral paste from the Himalayan mountains. It contains an abundance of trace minerals, antioxidants, organic acids, and nutrient-transporting compounds. It has been known throughout history to boost vitality and strength. Just pop a couple of gummies in and chew or suck them slowly for a steady release of the delicious, earthly, but slightly sweet natural flavor. Your taste buds will enjoy the delicious treat while your body soaks up massive amounts of feel-good nutrition. Rich with fulvic acid, humic acid, vitamins, enzymes, bioflavonoids, antioxidants, metabolites, and over 40 trace minerals, Shilajit gummies can help support energy production, support performance and recovery, support healthy muscles, promote collagen synthesis, promote healthy hormone levels, increase cellular energy, decrease fatigue, promote health. I absolutely love Organifi Shilajit gummies, and I love knowing that there's something sweet that I can eat that doesn't come with all the challenges most sweet stuff does. If you'd enjoy something tasty that enhances nutrient variety, delivers the minerals your body needs, and helps you look and feel great, don't wait. Get your Shilajit gummies now. Hint, don't just buy 1 bag because they'll be gone before you know it. Get your 20% Spirit Gym discount on your Shilajit gummies. Go to Organifi.com/Chek20. That's Organifi, ORGANIFI.com/Chek20 to get your 20% discount on these amazing, nutritious gummies.
You know, what you're saying about writing, I'd like to share some thoughts with you and everybody listening, because I think it's very important. And I teach these things, and I've brought this up to the attention of many of my students, because one of the things that started happening several years ago is, you know, to graduate from my institute, it's a 5-year training program, a multidisciplinary school for holistic health. And we started getting tests sent back in that were just like one long text message with no punctuation, literally like a sea of text that would go on for 20 pages, right? You know, this is 100 and some of these, my final exams, 150 questions. And I would be seeing this stuff and going, what in the world is going on? And so when you look at the process of manifestation, first it's dreaming, then it's thinking. So dreaming would be the highest vibration. That would be spirit, or the fire realm of alchemy, divine fire. Thought would be the air element. Word would be a step down in the air element because it's becoming physical. The mental is becoming physical, but the act of writing is the deed, which is the embodiment of it. So when we take the manifestation process from dreaming to thinking to speaking to writing, we are bringing the experience of the dream into a stage of tangible manifestation, and we're actually engaging it by letting it move through us because we're scribing our experience.
Exactly. And you're making the shapes and the forms. And when you're tapping on a screen, you aren't. They're just digital.
Yeah, they're
not real.
There's no life in them. They're disensouled. And the other thing is that handwriting carries the signature of the spirit and the soul of the person that writes it. This is why we have an entire field of handwriting analysis. It's used by the FBI and government security agencies. I've read numerous books on it. My mother took a course on handwriting analysis. And there's been times in my life where people have asked me for help with someone that was having some kind of a crisis. And I would just say to them, do you have anything with their handwriting on it? And there's been cases where they have. And I just empty myself. And because I'm very aware that all souls are just an expression of the rest of me, like they are for all of us, I just empty myself and just let what spirit wants to give me. And I've been able to completely and utterly accurately diagnose what's going on with a person. But you could not do that if that person's writing was typed. There's no way. So as we're moving the pencil or the pen, our own subtle energy signatures, because it's the spirit that's guiding the motor process. So they're actually encoding the spirit and the soul right into the writing. And I think that's very, very important, because if you're just like we talked about the lumen natura, the inner light, it's invisible to the physical eye, but it's not to the clairvoyant eye. When a person's reading their own dream recordings that was written by their hand, I believe from a clairvoyant perspective that the dreams actually being broadcast out of their handwriting back at them.
Me too. It's like a process of remembering.
Yeah, it
when
is.
you write something out properly, you're remembering it, and you're actually creating it and solidifying it and manifesting it. And I think that's totally true. And lucid dreaming has taught me since I was small that your thoughts, your ideas take on forms and shapes, and they become reality. So in a lucid dream, you think of something, and if you're conscious in that moment, and it appears. And the same is true of life, but it moves in a much slower, solid, I don't know, like unsubtle process, but it is happening all the time. And so you can work magic in dreaming. And I think writing dreaming down is one of the greatest tools for it. And the Egyptians totally understood this and communicated it very effectively, that writing and drawing create manifest things, which is why they will show their demons tied down or stabbed, because they didn't want their demons to actually leap off the walls.
I'm going to have to make an introduction for you, Sarah, because one of my clients and students, her name's Alexandra Walterstrick, and she's from Germany. She owns a publishing company. She lives in Egypt. She has nonprofit organizations to help children and others there, but she's an expert in hieroglyphics.
Wow.
And she does work with me privately, and she often paints hieroglyphics into her paintings. But as I've been talking to you over and over again, I keep getting a voice inside of me saying, you got to connect her with Alexandra, because I think there's something meant to happen between you. She also takes people on trips to Egypt, and, you know, she's an expert in all that stuff. But I think the two of you will hit it off. So I'll make sure I make that connection. Sarah, one of the things I wanted to ask you about is, you know, dreams are generally considered to emerge from the unconscious. Thoughts are typically what we think of as an expression of our cognitive processes. Thoughts can come and go, as you know, like leaves blowing in the wind. What do you feel the difference are between dreams and thoughts?
Guess for me, dreams work with symbols and images, and
right.
thoughts work with words and
right. That's a great point.
concepts.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. thoughts are quite linear in comparison to dreams.
Yeah, with dreams, you get this novel association process happening as well. So they very quickly become dimensional space. They're made up of things. And this is why, this is another reason why I'm so interested in hieroglyphs, is because the hieroglyphs represent real things. You have this multi-dimensional nature of association, because not only do you make associations with the word, a lot of Egyptian dream interpretation is based on wordplay and punning. You also have associations based upon the images that are used. So, for example, there are loads and loads of words in the Egyptian language that begin with the sound mer, and some of those are using a chisel, and I think a chisel and an owl, or at least one of them. A lot of them begin with chisel, and when they begin with chisel, it usually relates to destruction of some sort, either destruction of a body or bodily death or becoming ill or like chipping away. If you think of a chisel, you think of chipping away. So it's sort of, that's how I make sense of it.
Breaking down.
Some of them some of them start with a hoe, and the hoe is the sign of something that's beloved. Mer is a word that means beloved, and the sign is the hoe. And a lot of words used to describe sex and lovemaking involve the hoe, because it's ploughing the earth, and sex is about ploughing the earth and sowing seeds, so that you can make those associations. And then a lot of the other ones are the owl and the open mouth, and the mer beginning there relates to chiefs or overseers or people that are in charge of something. And so you've got the owl, who is very observant, noticing everything all the time, and the open mouth, which is telling people what to do. So you make all these novel associations, but then you also have the phonetic dimension to it as well. So when you dream in hieroglyphs in that script, you can imagine it's a much more sort of multi-dimensional multi-sensory type of experience, because you have all these layers of association that we don't have with abstract language, and we already have a lot with our own language.
Yeah, those are all very important points, and I really appreciate you sharing that perspective. What you've just given me as a gift is something that I haven't done before, but I want to start doing now. Because oftentimes my patients and clients, I work with people that are having all sorts of serious health challenges. So to them, I call patients, but I also have clients that come to me with life crisis challenges, midlife crisis, and just lost in life, which I, call those clients. But I encourage them all to write down their dreams and share them with me so we can analyze them. And what I'm going to do now, because of your influence, I'm going to take key concepts out of people's dreams, and I'm going to search the internet for hieroglyphics. So somebody's, drowning, let's say, I'm going to search to see what the hieroglyphic for drowning would be in different languages, maybe pictograms from China and things like that. Because what you've just given me is the fact that by looking at the pictogram, I might be able to see which concepts fit together.
Absolutely.
Such as gardening as sex. That's a really good one, because I could go on for an hour just on the connections between gardening, sex, and life, and I think that's a really beautiful way to look deeper into a dream and see what isn't so obvious just in the written aspect of the dream, but what they're pointing to.
Exactly.
In other words, go backwards. Instead of going from hieroglyphic and trying to write out what it means, go from the written word, look at the context and say, now, what would a hieroglyphic say about this?
Exactly, like the root of it. So, for example, the Egyptian name for Thoth is Jehuti, and the earliest renderings of that name are a resting serpent and half a loaf of bread, which suggests that time is feminine and is a serpent, and relates the serpent to the processes of time. There are different types of time, but Jehuti uses the same symbols that the word for time, a particular type of time, uses, which is the individual time span of a person's life, like the individual's experiences. They've got like different concepts of time in ancient Egypt, but that tells me a lot about how they thought of Jehuti, because he's a god of the moon, he's the god of time, he's a god of healing. So you have the resting serpent, you have half a loaf of bread, which is the female determinative, it's like a female word, and then a twisted flax, which represents eternity. So Jehuti and Thoth later on is just represented by an ibis bird on his own. But if you go back to the oldest representations, like you say, it hints at the essence, the idea, the essence of the concept and the thought, which I think, because often intuitively it feels absolutely right. So, for example, like the myrrh, for example, which I've just given you, don't they sound so right? Intuitively, chipping away at something, you're wearing something down. Myrrh often refers to old age or becoming decrepit or becoming ill. So chipping away is like, makes complete sense. And like ploughing makes sense in terms of sex, because you're sowing your seed. And then it can also refer to lakes as well. And so you can see what they're getting at with words. They're not just sounds, and words have become sounds to us, although they do have this like deeper etymological meaning. Quite often the hieroglyphs, many more words come from the ancient Egyptian language than we think. If you look at hieroglyphs pictorially, they make a lot more sense. And it's a really perfect scribal system for me. I mean, I absolutely love painting hieroglyphs. I've got, I use like ink and papyrus and reed pens. Like using all those materials makes such a difference as well, because it's a meditative process to paint a hieroglyph. And by doing something like experimental archaeology often opens up for archaeologists. Oh, they did this because of this reason, or the things are represented in this way because when you make this thing, you have this experience. So it's a kind of experimental archaeology. And I think that hieroglyphs will start appearing in your dreams as soon as you start drawing and painting them. They're magical. They are God's words.
I have many books in my library. I have a whole section of my library for art. And I have many books of not only hieroglyphs, but all sorts of different languages that people have channeled in, such as angelic languages and healing languages. Some of these books are amazing. And what I do art to help people heal. So I will do healing art for clients, and I'll connect to their soul, and I'll ask the soul to give me the image that if I paint it for them and they keep it in their environment, it helps create harmony within them and helps basically bring their systems online so the body balances out. But I'll often look through the books or ask my soul to guide me, and I'll get a specific symbol or hieroglyph, and I'll paint it right into the art. But it's often very interesting to see what I'm guided to and where I'm told to put it in relationship to the other imagery. But I think all that stuff's so important. And I know how much I've grown from that process, just because you learn so much. Like if I say, okay, I need to find a hieroglyph or an ancient symbol that represents love and relationship, because I track this person's cancer back to a long-term battle with their spouse. And so I have to go look these things up, and I might end up looking at 20 or 30 of them, and they each have slightly different nuances. And all of a sudden I realize I've just learned a whole bunch of stuff about love and relationships that I wasn't conscious of before.
Absolutely. Which one did you go with? Did you go with Smart Away?
What's that?
Did you go with Smart Away? Union. That's one of my favorite hieroglyphs.
I can't even remember. I literally have been doing this for so long, and I've got so many books. And I've got from many different cultures, from the Aztec culture, from the Mayan culture, from Egyptian, Aboriginal, I've got probably a dozen different books that have these types of symbols in them. I've got Buddhist symbols. I've got symbols from different world religions. I've been studying symbology for a long time because I think, well, this is a sort of a sidetrack, but it's related. But I'll preface by what I'm going to say by, I read a book that I think you'd find very interesting. It was by Henry Corbin. It's called The World as Icon.
I think I know Henry Corbin. I don't know if I've read that book, but
it's pretty powerful. Basically, what it shows you is that everything in the manifest world, including our bodies, the world itself, everything, trees, houses, they're all actually symbols. They are actually pointing us towards something that's, just like Plato's archetypes, he said, are actually the true aspects, but the manifestations of them in the physical world are like shadows. But when you see how Henry Corbin, and I think a lot of it comes from Ibn al-Arabi, but he's showing you through a lot of different approaches how everything here is really like a symbol pointing to something that's beyond it, something deeper. And the analogy I give my students, I say, look, if you want to know what the most dangerous thing that can ever happen to you in relationship with somebody you love, like your spouse, just think that you know who they are, and the mystery stops. And that's when your relationship's going to start breaking down, because now you've turned them into a sign. Nobody has a mystical experience pulling up to a stop sign, but you can meditate on the Christian cross or the Ankh or anything and have a myriad of very powerful experiences. So the metaphor is, if you turn everything in the world into a sign and concretize it, then it loses its mystery, its transcendent function. And then life just becomes flatland. And the next thing you know, you're on Prozac or something, So I think just like dreams are very symbolic, I think when you start getting deeper into all these things, you start to see that really this is very much like the analogy of Plato's cave, that the whole physical universe is really like, just like we project an image on a screen with a movie projector or a slide projector. Well, what if you could do that in 4 dimensions, length, width, depth, and time, and that it changed like the seasons as the story being projected itself was being changed? So it turns out to me that the whole of existence, the whole cosmos, is the divine mirror, except it's a living mirror. And all these symbols are there, like God leaving a little crumb trail to say, hey, if you want to figure out who you are, just follow the crumbs, because they'll always lead you to the truth. And I think it doesn't matter where you are. I've read beautiful stories and seen documentaries of people becoming fully enlightened in prison because they had time to be in and with themselves and read the books they never had a chance to read, or start in an art program. In fact, my brother, who committed suicide, unfortunately, entered an art program when he was in prison. And the only thing I have from him is a piece of art he sent me from prison, which is a stork standing on one leg with a red sun setting. So from an art perspective, wow, it's
that's an effective spirit.
Isn't that amazing?
Mm.
And he's standing on one leg as a stork, a bird that spends a lot of time alone. He could never really feel connected. One leg, red sun setting. He died about a year after he made that piece of art for me.
Wow.
And there's clouds in the sky, which represents unknowing. He had a hard time really putting the pieces together of life.
Wow.
And so, my brother is the last person I'd ever have expected to be in an art class. He was a drug addict by the time he was in the 7th grade, and he just had a lot of violence in him. But, my point is so my brother had to go to prison to enter into an art program. And the one thing he left me, his brother, me, an art therapist, is a pictogram of his authentic state that led to him committing suicide.
Wow.
But I look at it every day and blow smoke to him and connect to him in the afterlife, because it's my reminder of it's a painful reminder, but how important it is to realize the sacredness of people that you love. And sometimes the circumstances of life distract us from the fact that even the people that challenge us most are just as much God as we are. And we get too caught up in the minor things and forget the beauty of who's right in front of us, you know.
This is something that I'm feeling very strongly at the moment, is this idea of how this is how you work magic as well. This is like the law of correspondences. This you see like your brother's painting when you were telling me about it is the hieroglyph for the Ak, the effective spirit or a ghost. That's actually the hieroglyph for a ghost.
Is it really?
Yeah, it's not a stork. It's a crested ibis, but it's a very similar kind of long-legged.
Very much like an ibis.
Yeah.
This one has a red.
Yeah, they have a crest.
Yeah, a red crest coming out of his head. He painted
and
a red crest.
The crested ibis has a red crest.
Yeah, and he painted that one, and maybe it is an ibis. It looks like a stork, but it could be an ibis and stork are similar looking. From it's not a complex. It's more like a line drawing that got colored in.
So the symbol for the Ak, or the word Ak, has a crested ibis with a sun in the background.
Oh,
and it means it's Aket, the sign Aket, and it means effective spirit or ghost.
That is so wild, amazing. Like, you know, right? What we're doing right now is exactly what we all need to do a lot more of, I think.
And so, you know, I'm feeling this like need when you see things like that, you recognize symbols like that, you bring other symbols like that to it. It's like you're pulling, you're knitting reality, the cosmos together. You're creating like a cohesive pattern. You're like part of the storytelling of the world. I love that. I think it's absolutely magical, and that's what life is.
I tell my students every question mark is the tail of the answer that you're looking for, and you got to grab on it and keep pulling until you get to the other end. You know, if you can visualize that, the analogy I give my students is if you were sitting in your yard and you had a wooden fence around the yard and one of the slats was knocked out, and all of a sudden you looked over and you saw the tail of an animal, but you couldn't see what it was. If you grabbed the tail and pulled it through the hole, you'd say, oh, it's a cat, or it's a rat, or it's a raccoon. I said, but most people are so lazy that you start using AI and all this to answer all your questions. You don't pull on the tail. You don't get the experience. And I don't think without the metaphor of pulling on the tail, we actually become really educated. We don't have the experience of learning. It just becomes information. And if we don't have an experience to bind the information in us, it's too ephemeral. It just comes and goes.
Binding is the perfect point, because that's what it's all about in the ancient world, is this idea of binding magic. The knot of Isis, the tiet, is how you manifest, is you bind things together that match. You're like, we're patterned, we're trained and primed to recognize patterns. And what we often don't do, because of how culture has evolved, I suppose, is continue matching those patterns. We think it's not important, but actually that's the fabric of the world, of reality.
It is. And if we start using technology to do all that for us, then what have we become? Or what?
I think people are going to, I can't believe that people aren't kind of going to get turned off and bored by it. I think that people are just going to start turning off because it's tedious. It's like just sewage, visual pollution.
It is. Yeah. You know, and the overwhelm of the amount of information coming at people. I don't know if you studied Robert O. Becker's work at all, but in his first book, The Body Electric, which I believe was written in about 1990, quite a long time ago, but he said at that time, the average person today experiences more information in 24 hours than a person who lived at 1900 did in their entire lifetime. So once you start throwing AI and high-speed computers into the mix and social media, I think that's too many tails to pull on. So what you do, you just lay down and give up. You just become passive.
Yeah, well, I think that's already what's happening, this passive consumption of nothingy stuff that's just addictive. It's like drugs for the eyes, or it works in this really weird way. But I think also what it isn't real information, because it doesn't have that divine spark in it. It's just, it's a large language model that's just putting words together that are usually put together to spew out stuff and nonsense.
Yeah.
It's not, it's got no soul, it's got no feeling. Like, and it's bizarre to me how many people, I know that AI generated images can be very complex these days and very deceptive and look very real, but there's still something sort of uncanny and weird about them. And I think more and more people are going to be turning off and just wanting to go fully analog. My daughter already, she's just not interested in phones, and she doesn't like it, and she makes a lot of stuff and does a lot of drawing and a lot of writing. And I'm so happy about that, because I think it's one of the things that's so sad for young people is they never had the experience of pre-internet, of the world before being always connected. I listened to a radio program years and years ago now, which really interested me. And this was way before the kind of the wave of AI fear and ChatGPT. And it was talking about how in Victorian times, when people, I don't know when it was actually, but in the time when they were introducing railroads, I think it was in America, 2 women went on the first steam train, and they fainted because it went so fast and they were so overwhelmed. And you kind of think, we're still really those kinds of people. And you think about the first audiences that went to see the first cinema, like the Great Train Robbery, and they were screaming and terrified. And you think like how complex, dense and bombarding information is for us now, that we have to navigate this like digital space. People don't want it. I don't think people actually do enjoy it. That's why we have all this proliferation of depression and anxiety, is because the world is just overwhelming and too much information and too intense. And especially as a young person, when, I feel like it took me quite a long time to recognize that there were systems or frameworks where my ideas about the spirit or my philosophies had some framework that I could feel that I was attached to. I just felt like I was floating in the air for a long time. I was like a character in a film. But the more I learned growing up, it took me a long time. And kids these days are in this just wildly contradictory, constantly shifting, constantly changing, weird digital environment where I think in some instances they can obviously access things they want to know about much quicker. I used to have to go to the library when I was a kid. So in some instances it can be really useful. They can maybe find their tribe a bit quicker. Any idea that they have, they can look it up. Parts of that are extraordinarily fantastic. But I think anyone sensible is just going to check out after a certain time.
Well, these certainly aren't things I expected to talk about, but I really think it's important, and I love your perspectives. I know from my life as a child being raised on a farm, and we own a farm. We have a 14-acre farm here, and my kids go to Waldorf school specifically for these reasons. My first one's growing up. He's 46 now, and I have a 4-year-old grandson. But when my younger ones came along, I'm 64 now, so I got a big surprise at 56. I think it was 54 or 56. Mana came, and then Zoe came 3 years later. But I said, I've got to make sure these kids get grounded in natural cycles in the earth. So they're involved in gardening and everything else. But I
do think gardening is literally the most useful and divine thing that anyone can ever do.
It's amazing. We have 58 animals on our property, goats, pigs, chickens, cats, dogs, bees. I don't know how many bees we got, but we got 58 that we have to feed every day. So the kids are very, very involved. Now we have 2 orchards, we have a greenhouse, we have outdoor gardens, and they're involved in all of it. They cook food. They cook food and like pastries and things or desserts and sell them to the students when we have workshops here. So they learning how to run a business and they dig it, they're really into it. But the point I was leading to is I know that everything in nature is ensouled. I am a guy that's been lifting rocks for a long, long time, and I build sculptures out of stone, and even the stones talk to me and guide me. And so when you go out into nature, and we know for sure that nature's healing, that's well known. And then back, I don't know when it was, in the late 80s or early 90s, these psychologists from New York identified what's classified now as nature deficit. And they found that if you just took kids with ADHD and related disorders into nature one time a week for 3 hours and just let them play, didn't give them any controls or directions, and just said, here, play, hike the trails, go out and have fun, that it wiped out all these psychological challenges they were having. And it only took once a week. But I remember as a kid, I have to disappear into the woods because my stepfather was an extremely violent man. So I had to kind of disappear for a while to let him calm down, or it could be fatal. But I felt so supported by nature. And I literally felt like the trees were holding me and hugging me. And, I had a real close connection with our pigs. We had a lot of pigs, and I used to ride the pigs, and the pigs were very sensitive to my emotions as a child. And it felt like they were talking to me. But the point I'm bringing up here is that, and I'm leading to another correlation, is that when you're in nature and in a relationship with nature, you're actually embracing each other. There's something about us that nature gains from. There's something about nature that we all gain from. And so somehow we need each other. And I'll give you an example. I talk to the spirits of the house. I know all the spirits of every building. And I've actually written entire books by just asking them questions. And some of my friends just get their minds blown when they read these books. I'm like, that came from the spirit of this house. I'm like, how in the world, And so I remember when I first called the spirit of the house forward here in my office, his name's Jacob. And I began our relationship. And then I said, Jacob, would you like to write a book together? He said, oh, I'd love that. And I said, we were talking, and he said, Paul, you're the first human being that's ever talked to us. We're very aware of every human being or animal or anything that comes inside the house because it's our body, but it's so rare to find a human being that actually knows that we're here. And so my point is, you see, I come into what most people think of as a stack of wood with windows and doors, but I come into something that's alive and has spirit and has consciousness and answers questions for me and can even tell me when there's a leak that needs to be fixed or something. And it's always right. And there's the give and take, the breathing of life, the nourishing of life. And I think when we make art, just like we talked about the handwriting, I think we ensoul our art. And because a lot of my work that I do with people in my workshops and in my institute requires art, a lot of people have been using AI to do it, which I tell them I really prefer you don't do that. And so I've also spent time looking at AR generated art because I want to see, what's going on. And the thing that I wanted to share with you is, other than the fact that everything I've just said, but the thing I notice fairly consistently about AI generated art is it's too perfect. You see people that would do normally, instead of doing a painting like the scene of an ocean shore with the sun going down or a scene of nature, I look at it and I don't even, there's not even words in our language for how to describe this, but it's, Lao Tzu says basically if you sharpen a knife too much, it gets dull. This is so polished that it doesn't look like art to me anymore.
I think it's a natural human tendency to have a particular focus in a piece of art.
Yeah.
And AI, because it's putting all of these images together, it's flat because the focus
that's a great word.
Is everywhere. And, if I draw something, there's one part of it that's sort of the most pulsing, living part of it, I find. And there'll be like there's more of a constellation of focus points. And in AI art, there's a very sort of sense of like flatness and sameness. Like you notice when they tried to do AI videos that are supposed to look very, very real, every bit of the image or the video is in focus, and there's too much sharp focus on everything.
Right.
There's this kind of blanket dispersal, I suppose, of it. Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure it's going to change and become more and more, even more complex and even harder to determine whether or not it's real. But at the moment, it's really occupying that uncanny valley space where it just makes me feel uneasy and weird, and I can't explain why. I remember walking into a house talking about houses having souls and spirits. I think place like very much does communicate feelings to me as well, in terms of like uneasiness or easiness or like peace or chaos feelings. And the house, I walked into a house once and it had the most amazing feeling of like serenity, and it was a wattle and daub medieval house. And I think there is something about when houses are made out of natural material, like Rudolf Steiner talks often about the different materials have different qualities, and depending on where the trees were growing or the type of tree or the family of trees that this house is made out of. And then wattle and daub, it just has this amazing also I think there's something about the acoustics of a property that affect how comfortable or relaxed I feel. And it's such a subtle, weird thing. But this wattle and daub house that I went into, it just had the most amazing feeling of like stillness and calmness, and a good energy, like it felt like such a living, loving house. It was really amazing. I've definitely had those feelings.
Yeah, it's really beautiful and important. Sarah, I'm totally loving this conversation. I feel like I could talk to you for 1,000 days and nights and not sleep or eat, which is beautiful. And so I'm really grateful that you've done all this work within yourself to grow yourself, and you've stayed so in touch with what I would call reality, the real one. There's so many things I want to talk to you about. We've only made it to question 5 on my list of about 15. But what I'd like to do, just to sort of round the podcast out, is have you take us through a bit of an overview of what you offer in the book that we haven't talked about. I'm particularly interested in the sections in your book. You have a beautiful chronological history of our relationship to dreaming and things like that. And you also talk about dream incubation. So would you be so kind as just give us an overview of what you share in the book, why it's important, and maybe what the reader can expect to learn more about by buying your book and getting into it, which is it's a really beautiful book to read. It's easy to read. You used a big enough font that I don't have to squint, and I found it an easy reading book, which I really like, because a lot of these books today are hard to read. So fire away.
Well, it is a bit of an unusual book because it blends a bit of kind of prose and narrative and my research as well. So I think I mentioned earlier on, my process for writing was write a chapter about a particular era, and then I did my own incubation ritual to imagine myself in that time and space and imagine myself taking part in some sort of dream ritual. And then I wrote that as a sort of short narrative section, like a bit of a story, so that it can conjure up these images, these ideas, these symbols in the reader's mind. And that was really important to me that I got to do that. My whole life, I can't remember not being able to read. I always loved reading. My mum taught me to read before I went to school. I always really loved books. I've always really enjoyed reading novels. And I think reading novels has informed the narrative structure that my dreams often take, because I read a lot of novels, I read a lot of stories, and I think in a very sort of storied type of way. So I wanted to include some of that because dreaming works so powerfully connected to emotion and memory that I think it's really useful to have like contextualized, creative, imaginal experiences in order for you to have an inner experience of the information that you're discussing in the book. So, for example, I thought about it. The book's called Dream Mysteries. And I thought about it in relation to something like the Eleusinian Mysteries, where you have this great psychodrama, this great narrative played out, this play that affects the consciousness of the mistai, of the people that are witnessing it. And probably they process that most deeply in dream states, or at least in altered states. And it's something that will continue to echo throughout their dreams for probably a very long time. It's deeply symbolic, it's deeply intense and emotional. It could be scary, and it's something they're going to remember forever. So I thought about that. So treating the process of the book as a kind of self-initiation process. So you dream with each chapter. And so I'm looking at the historical archaeological evidence for anything that points towards dream rituals in ancient history. And really for that, you're looking back to the Stone Age, because we can see there's evidence of people sleeping on top of graves, and that people were visiting the graves of ancestors and spending time there and making offerings there and things like that. Even the Neanderthals gave grave goods, and burials. So what I would say is perhaps like the earliest clear-cut evidence for specific rituals of sleeping close to the ancestors or sleeping close to deceased people is in Çatalhöyük, which is one of the earliest human settlements in Anatolia. People were building their sleeping platforms on top of interred skeletons. So they were trying to sleep close to people that had died. And so there probably was this idea that in sleep, in dreams, you can contact those people that are lying underneath you. And I think it's one of the startling things about dreams that people forget, is that in dreams, you regularly, if you've had people that die in your life, frequently you can see them in a dream and you can interact with them. And it's quite a meaningful, moving experience for a lot of people.
Well, no, if I could interject, not only that, Sarah, but as I'm sure you know, I didn't tell you this. I have two wives, but my other wife, Angie, is a very, very skilled shaman and medium and does a lot of work with psychopomp work, and I do too. And it is really common for people to come to a person whose loved one has died, a spouse, a friend, a child, and they will tell them things like where a will is hidden in the house, and things that are tangibly, undeniably, shall we say, based in the now of our lives. And so it makes one have to seriously question, again, do we really die? Because how can a deceased person's soul come back, present themselves to you, and tell you where the wedding ring from 30 years ago is, or where the will is, or where this or that is, or how people are doing on the other side, and very important information. This is really, really common, and most people that don't study this would never realize this, but it is really common.
And it was a thing much later on as well. Like, we have written records for the fact that the dead were consulted to know about the future. So it's just a common everyday part of life that the dead were consulted on things, like you say, on trying to locate a lost object, who stole something. There's accounts in ancient Egypt of trying to find out who stole something by asking a dead person. That you have these letters to the dead that are written to the deceased, that if the living had done something that, well, maybe if the living had killed this particular dead person, that the dead would come back and haunt them in dreams. That's a very common aspect of ancient Egyptian dream records, is that people are writing letters to the dead saying, please leave me alone. So it was something that was just considered a normal part of reality in those days. And in the Stone Age, we can only imagine, but it does seem like they wanted to keep their dead close to them, to continue to involve them in the world of the living in some way. And because the sleeping platforms, you can see in the arrangements of these little dwellings in Çatalhöyük, you can see that the sleeping platforms are very intentionally, the bodies are always underneath there. They're not underneath the hearth. They're not underneath any other part of the house. They're always underneath the places where people would have slept. So I think that for ancient people and for people now, when they have a direct experience of communicating with someone that they love that's died, it feels very, very real. And it does hint at that there is somewhere you go when you die, that the soul somehow continues. And I think probably dreaming is the beginning of this idea of afterlife, this idea of the eternal soul, that this is where we get the ideas from, because it's very ordinary and everyday. I think psychedelic drugs and psychedelic plants played their role, but I think in terms of thinking that the soul continues on after death, I think it's more likely to just be that everyday experience of, obviously death is more frequently around for ancient people as well, so they're going to have much more interactions with deceased people. So that's one of the biggest things about it. So really the book is looking at evidence for where there seems to be ritual evidence, written evidence, archaeological record evidence for people purposefully dreaming for, and it usually falls into either divinatory, oracular, or contacting gods, contacting the dead, and healing, which kind of all tend to link in, actually, because it's considered to be, the dream space is considered to be this place where healing can occur, because it's like this generative place where things can suddenly manifest, where things can suddenly happen, and you can experience it directly.
Yes, I'd love it if you could expand more on the incubation process, because that's a big part of your book. You've talked about your own incubation process, but maybe you could describe for the audience what that is, and maybe how they can use the process. I know you go into it a lot in your book, so I don't want people to not read the book, but if there's something that you can share about that a person could put into practice right now, then they would certainly realize there's a lot more they can use in your book. I think your book's an important book. That's why I wanted to talk to you. And I just want to say, Sarah, I have studied a lot of books on dream interpretation. I've been studying Jung's collected work for at least 30 plus years. I've studied Steiner's collected works I've got 185 Steiner books in my library. So I chose to have you on the podcast because your book touched me in a way that none of these other books have. There was one other book I wanted to get the author on, but unfortunately I tried to track him down. It turned out he had passed away. But I just felt like I had to share you, and I'm really glad I did. So maybe you can take us into some incubation understanding and things that maybe we could apply now.
I think of incubation as being a magical practice, like we were talking earlier about your brother's painting, this idea of this law of correspondences. So usually there are certain sort of stages to any, because I think about the goal of incubation is that you have an interaction with either the deceased or a divine entity. Usually you're privy to some special knowledge. So you go about that the same way that you would do in any sort of theurgic rite, which is firstly kind of purification, like preparation of the body. And so you have a ritual bath, you cleanse yourself. Not only that, you would perhaps meditate to like purge or balance your emotions or your thoughts. Also, I think tidying your bedroom, tidying the space where you're living, preparing your space like a temple, actually works really well. And all tidying is one of the most magical acts you can do, the ordering of things to make them harmonious. And then you could do something like writing down the particular entity that you want to evoke.
Intention.
Setting an intention, and you can do that. It doesn't, I don't do these like long, complex PGM reading ancient spell rites. I think the thing that's most important to me and that's the most resonant for dreaming is emotion. If you can conjure up the feeling, the energy, then that's what attracts these experiences, because dreaming is such an emotional process.
Yes.
So very often I find, like, this is why I do so much sort of playing and ridiculous and silly and fun things on the retreats, because the emotion and the feeling of ecstasy and lightness and childishness and ridiculousness and silliness and laughing is very conducive to having dreams later on, because you have this flush of good feeling hormones that I think positively influences the sorts of dreams that you're going to have in the evening. And I often think something that's really important to do and to consider when you're incubating for a dream is to fall asleep in a beautiful way, fall asleep feeling lovely and beautiful and very relaxed and very calm. And I remember as a little kid, because I was super into dreaming, and I used to think about when I was lying in bed, I'm going into this dream place, I'm going on a dream adventure, I'm going to go to this place. And I used to have this little ritual that I used to do when I was very small. I had a cabin bed, and I used to pretend I had a cupboard next to my cabin bed where I'd get my dream helmet out and I'd put my dream helmet on. And then I had there were imaginary dials on the side. It was all just imaginary. I had a very, very, very strong visual imagination. And then I'd turn the dial to what I wanted to do, where I wanted to go. And then I would just lie down. And my experience of dreaming as a child was that it was like my soul would be pulled down into a dream space. Mm-hmm. And it was like I describe it like Alice falling down the rabbit hole, which I did read a lot as a child. So I think I created that as my entryway. And that's a really good technique for entering a dream, is to imagine yourself falling down the hole like Alice. That process of falling down the rabbit hole is just such a good description of hypnagogia for me. I do think Lewis Carroll was a really experienced everyday lucid dreamer, because so much stuff in Alice's Adventures in Wonderland is lucid taught. Alice reminding herself constantly of who she is, of noticing things going weird, of repeating her name, of wordplay and punning. It's such a good description of lucid dreaming. So you have the purification of body and space, really important, useful in terms of if you're looking at ancient practices, to use some sort of divine fumigation like frankincense. Yes. And you think about frankincense as space clearing. Frankincense is like a holy divine resin, and the gods love it. And when we burn frankincense, it's one of the most common rituals in the Asclepians is that this thing called the theohenia, which is a sacred meal. So it's a meal shared between a human being and the god. And so you prepare a sacrificed animal, you cook that animal, the human being eats part of it, and then the rest that's burned is sent up as smoke to the heavens for the gods to eat. So you're binding, we talked about binding earlier, you're binding the divine and the mortal together.
Right.
You can do that in other ways, where you're looking for correspondences. So if you want to dream about a particular deity, you find the plants, the herbs, the real world material things that are already bound historically to them, and you bring them into your environment. And that's kind of inviting and calling them and pulling them into your environment.
I think they serve as antennas.
Yeah. They're attractors, if you like, I suppose, they have these divine correspondences, and the nature of reality is that they're going to be attracted to one another, that they're connected already. They're already bound in a non-physical, non-local type of way. But and I think writing down a prayer and intention is really important. And then also you could think about if you were to write a prayer down on papyrus, you could burn it in flame and send that smoke up to heaven.
Oh, yeah, that's beautiful.
The gods. And then I think it's good to sort of develop your own incubation practice that works. And like I say, the feeling is the most important thing. But generally speaking, the stages are purification, some magical correspondence type ritual, and a strong emotional intention, and make an offering for, if you want a particular deity or a particular entity to visit you, make some sort of offering. Like Odysseus has a chthonic altar, and actually, so I live now part-time in a little village where the sanctuary of Asclepius was, which is the biggest holistic healing sanctuary in Greece, and I live just outside of it. And in the sanctuary of the Egyptian gods there, because they worship the Egyptian gods and they sort of syncretized a lot of gods in the Greco-Roman period, there's a chthonic altar, and chthonic altars were altars that are just often pits dug in the ground where you pour wine or you pour honey or you pour milk, and you're nourishing the gods of the underworld. So that's a nice thing to do as well, because I think it's very important to have this communing, this conversation with nature. And often we can do that by gardening, by like nurturing plants. And we can do that by, so, you know, I think if you want to cultivate a relationship with a divine entity, you grow the plants that are associated with them. If you're worshipping Apollo, grow helichrysum and drink helichrysum tea, and then you're weaving Apollo into the fabric of your being, and you're entering into relationship and dialogue. So I think the nature aspect's really important, and it takes a while to cultivate that, to like grow these plants and but like you were saying, nature does talk to us all the time. It's like nature. I remember during lockdown, I used to go, we had a nature reserve next to where I lived, and I went every single day into this nature reserve, and I developed like a romantic relationship with the land, because it just loved me and I loved it, and it spoke to me, and it delighted me. It, like the revelations of like new blossoms and new flowers every day, was like ecstasy. It was like an absolute gift, like showing me and revealing things to me. And I think, this is something that gets forgotten about when it comes to how healing might occur in dreams sometimes, or how healing can occur anytime, is that apocalypsis, that revelation, that just absolutely knowing where you are in the weave of the world, in the weave of the cosmos. Like your true existence in time and space is just miraculous at any time.
Yes.
Just being aware, just being conscious, just existing. And that moment of revelation, like Apollo is the god of healing. He's the father of Asclepius. And so it's interesting that prophecy should be associated with healing in Apollo. But I think it is because like really knowing, really feeling and understanding like the magic of your existence is absolutely miraculously, spontaneously healing. It's just like the sudden revelation of everything. Like apocalypse is the falling of the veil, the revealing.
It's all a miracle, really. I think if you want to age quickly, just lose touch with the miracle of life. Then you start to become a barnacle. Then you're in flatland. Then there is nothing but bills and work, and it's downhill from there.
Yeah, well, I think that this is what is happening with the use of devices and technology, is we are becoming disconnected and forgetting that. I've thought about gardening, because I've got a little garden in Greece. It's a tiny little garden. My bungalow's in an orange grove, but just cultivating that little bit of garden, I'm very conscious of the fact that every seed that I plant, everything that I look after, every leaf that I touch and stroke, it's like I'm developing and increasing the spirit in the world, because every plant, everything has spirit. And so by nurturing that spirit, I'm increasing the density of spiritual energy in that space, and it's alive. Like in Rudolf Steiner's book Knowledge of the Higher World, so the exercises that he has in that are great. And one of the exercises is when you're walking down, actually I might be paraphrasing this, but this is how I did it. It was basically about identifying the energy of something that's alive and something that's dead.
Yes.
And I did it walking down a road where people had obviously loved their gardens, and then other people just had tarmacked drives, and it was like life, death, death, life. You could just feel this like emanation of life. It's an aura. It's like you are cultivating your sensory organs of perception by doing this, because you feel life, even though there's nothing. You feel this aura of life, and then you feel the absolute absence of it. This like sucking in void when there's just a tarmac drive, and then this blossoming of life again when you come across another garden. So doing those kinds of exercises really helps you to see and to work on cultivating more life. And the more sort of spiritual life you develop, I think, and the more relationships that are non-verbal, non-digital, the more quality there is in your inner worlds as well, I think.
Yeah, Steiner also gives developmental exercises where you take a seed and you meditate on the seed and let it reveal itself to you. And I think that's very, very beautiful. And we talked earlier about seeds. And I think, Steiner's got a lot of great exercise. I think Steiner's still very underappreciated. And I suspect that Steiner's teachings are a long ways from reaching their public awareness. They're still growing.
It always blows my mind, like what he was able to do in a single lifetime. Like,
oh, it's crazy.
I was looking at the Gothenaeum the otother day, like 2 Gothenaeums, in fact, like so much stuff. And this is what you kind of think. If someone like Rudolf Steiner had the internet online now, like, are we limiting? We must be limiting human potential so much, actually, because at some point, a single human lifetime was enough to compose thousands of, I don't know. It's just, it seems extraordinary that he was able to achieve what he achieved in such a short period of time. It's incredible, mind-boggling amount of work.
Well, yes, and him and some others like him. Jung certainly fits into that category. Paramahansa Yogananda. I don't know if you've studied Hazrat Inyat Khan, a Sufi master, but he's got I think it's 12-volume set, which I have and I've studied a lot of. He was another one. I mean, this guy was just unbelievable. Amazing musician, teacher, writer. I mean, it was just like no end to some of these guys. And that brings up another important point. This is why I spend so much time studying these people, because they show me what any one of us is capable of. They inspire me to do it, and when I was a competitive motocross racer and stock car racer, what I did was whenever I was behind somebody that was beating me, I paid very close attention to how did they do it? Like, what lines are these guys taking? How are they getting through these turns faster than I am? And I studied them. And the more I studied them, the faster I got and the better I got. And when I was a competitive fighter, if someone beat me, then I wanted to be the first guy to hug them and say, hey, congratulations, because you're going to have to work hard to do it. And you just did it. And so then they became my teachers. And I think that, we're getting so lost in all this very shallow media that we're losing touch with the great geniuses who had true heart and soul and devoted their lives to humanity, that we end up with all these lost, confused souls on the internet with 1 million followers who are doing nothing but selling garbage and talking a lot of garbage, which to me is sad, because it's just an exemplification of everything that we're talking about and why it's so important. I mean, if people think the internet's magnificent, wait till you start really putting some time into your dreams. No comparison.
Yeah, I think, I think the internet is a tool that can be incredible in terms of accessing this knowledge or finding out about it or looking it up, but you've got to have the questions first. And I suppose with the generation that aren't cultivating any questions, that's the real worry. Because I worked in a school for a little while, and I worked with kids quite a lot, and I worked as a teacher in South London, and this was before everyone had mobile phones. And these kids were like naughty but really funny, into loads of things, had like niche little weird interests, and it was a really rough school, but these kids were just fun and full of life. And then the last time I worked in a school, I said, what sort of stuff are you into though? Like, and films you're into or music? Nothing. What do you want to do when you grow up? Oh, if you've got any ideas, I want to be an influencer. But influencing about what? Like nothing. There was, it was like, hello, like just no,
chasing dopamine,
no life questions or interest in
no depth
life. Yeah. It's very sad. It's very sad.
You don't
but I do
see
think
that.
There's also kids that are just being like, I've had enough of this, because it must be a nightmare for kids. Like that every single move is under the microscope. The minutiae of their life is like there for everyone to see. There's no secrets. There's no hiding. They've all got to subscribe and tick a box and say, I have to be this kind of person. It's so boring and rigid.
You don't see that in Waldorf educated children, though. I'm always, because we have 2 kids in Waldorf school, the way it's set up is the family, the parents have to get involved. You have to do, I think, 40 hours of work to support the school, even when you pay your tuition. And so Angie and Penny are both always down there helping set up stuff, bringing flowers from our flower fields. And and helping and food and everything else. And so having been to many of these school events and being around the parents and around the children, it's a completely different vibe. I had a really interesting experience. There was a Steiner-based fair. I can't remember. It was for one of the holidays. It might have been the new moon, or it was one of those seasonal type things. But it was like a kind of like a swap meet where all Steiner people and even kids all the way up to high school. And I walked up to this little booth, which was two 12th grade Steiner kids, one boy and one girl. I think they might have been brother and sister, but they were making homemade chocolate. And they had all these beautiful chocolates. And my God, the taste of the stuff was out of this world. And it just was just full of their spirit. And they were so grounded, and they looked you in the eyes when they talked to you, and they were fully there with you. And it's just like, wow, I mean, these kids are just not at all like the kids coming out of normal schools. And I think, there was a reason Steiner didn't want kids getting too caught up in technologies, even when he was writing. And there's a reason that, that like our kids are not allowed to watch television or use media during the school week. They're only allowed to engage it on the weekend. And even then they don't like them doing it. But, and they have fasts, media fasts, so that I can't, one or two times during the school year, they have to go for 1 month with no media. And even though we control our kids' media, it's amazing to see how much calmer they are after a month without having access to that stuff. And I think we all as parents need to start paying more attention to the formative forces that we're exposing children to, because just like everything that you've said about your childhood, it set the stage for you to be the woman you are today. And so did my childhood. And I think we need to realize that if we want to maintain our relationship with nature such that it supports our life, that we have to actually bring children into touch with nature and into the natural processes of life. And that includes the dreaming aspects of it, because I believe nature itself is dreaming. And
yeah.
it's in communion with us. But if it's like a relationship, if you don't participate in the relationship, then it just dries up, and we can't exist without that relationship. But we're getting so far up into the mental sphere, into the digital realm. As I tell people, trees there don't need water. Animals there don't need to be fed. And the more you live in that world, the more you forget that everything that's keeping you alive requires your participation.
It reminds me of, I remember having this epiphany about why people feed the birds, and it's something I see all the time walking around Istanbul, is there are these city animals that people have this real relationship with. They feed them and they love them. They love the seagulls when they go on the boats across the sea. They love the dogs and the cats are really, really well looked after, and they look like they're house cats, but they're just city cats. And it keeps the people of the city in dialogue with the city, caring for the city, loving the city. And I always remember stories about Nicole Tesla went to feed the birds a lot. And I remember having, it's hard to put into words, but having this real epiphany about what that actually means, because he's in dialogue with the birds. By caring for the birds, he's part of the world. He's in conversation with the world. He's got friends. He's got people that love him and appreciate him. And there's a scene in Mary Poppins as well, which I used to love as a child, where they feed the birds, and there's a song all about feeding the birds, and about, I don't know, it's about being in relationship still. Like, we've become very over associated with me and what's mine, and not being in relationship with the world. Like, we've become buying more and more stuff on Amazon, and it's weird, isn't it? Because so much, I always think about that episode of Batman, or that Batman film where the Joker, played by Jack Nicholson, he's got this company that produces loads of products that are killing people, and that's his like amazing. And I'm like, wow, that's kind of what Amazon, all these companies are like now, because we're buying like just really substandard toxic things that are killing us, but we think we want them. And so we're just killing ourselves because we don't have the relationship with nature. We aren't in dialogue with nature. We're living through this digital means. And if you don't maintain that contact with nature, then you're like a zombie.
Here's a strange thought that just jumped in my mind that, based on what you just said. Maybe I'm speaking of everybody as a whole, not you or I personally, but maybe the collective is actually bringing itself to death to remember itself and force itself to dream again.
I wonder.
You see, because like you and I are engaging our dreams and we have a very spiritual life. So we are full of the magic of life. So we don't need to die to go find the magic. We know where we're going when we die. But I think because the flow of spirit is so essential to our survival in our bodies, that maybe we're unconsciously bringing ourselves into an impasse where we have to die to remember who we are, because we're just not able to do it in the circumstances we've created around ourselves.
It is starting to feel a bit like a headlong rush into like just oblivion.
It does. Yeah. And it's concerning. And that's, why I started my Spirit Gym training program, is to help ground people in all the kinds of things we're talking about here. And it's a concern to me because, as you know, we're taking Mother Nature down the tubes with us. She'll recover, as Chernobyl was a great example of. But well,
isn't it funny how like that region has now got more biodiversity and more life because we've just left it alone?
Yeah.
And so it goes to show as well, like you look at something like lockdown where people were not allowed to move about and how life just like sprung up everywhere. Yeah. And I remember because I was living on the seaside then, and there were so many more seals in the sea, more fish that I know I've ever seen before. And just that one short period was enough for nature to just come back in the most like dramatic, exhilarating, ecstatic way. And everyone did love it and appreciate it. I saw people sitting on the beach just to watch the sunset that I'd never ever seen before. It was so amazing. And like every single day I went out and me and my daughter like went out to the nature reserve next to where I lived, like for the entire day, basically until it was dark. And I felt like we were in conversation with that place. Like it felt like this haven in a way that before lockdown, I hadn't noticed just how magical and how giving and friendly and part of me it was. But, I saw so many people out enjoying nature than I have seen since or before. It was amazing. It was such an opportunity to do things differently and for us to like really appreciate what's important. Because you think about the people, you couldn't go out and get coffee in a coffee shop, and all these things that we think are pleasures are actually just more consumption, more litter, more plastic, more material, more waste, and they're unnecessary.
Yeah. Well, it just goes to show you sometimes the devil's function is to point you to the good and the beauty and the true. And, metaphor being, of course, those behind the lockdowns were symbolic of the devil, but though it was very stressful, it brought a lot of people back into touch with things that are really important. For example, right down the road from me is a gardening and landscaping, big, huge place with just acres and acres of rocks that you can buy for building chimneys and floors and whatever. And because I teach stone lifting as a form of exercise and art and spiritual practice. And I went down there during the lockdowns and the place was packed. I'd never seen anything like it. I mean, this is a big place. The parking lots were full. There was long lines. And when I finally got to the cashier to buy my stuff, I said, what in the world is going on? She said, well, now that all these people are trapped at home, they all want to make their yards beautiful. She said, we've never had so much business in the history of this company. And so there you see the devil pointing you to the good, the beautiful, and the true. All of a sudden, people now are spending tons of money to make their houses and their yards beautiful again and to be there. A question I had before we end is, you and I have talked about a lot of stuff with dream incubation, purification, invocation, that's quite deeply spiritual. What kind of advice or suggestions do you have to people that might be non-believers and think people like you and I are just smoking too much pot, but we still want to inspire them to engage their dreams? What would you say to a person who's just like overly left brain or scientific materialist, but you'd want to inspire them to get into their dreams?
I mean, I don't smoke any weed. It doesn't agree with me. It makes me feel
I was
really
using
weird.
that as a metaphor.
And also when you smoke weed, it does suppress your dreaming, but it is kind of sometimes quite useful when you've been smoking for a while to stop, and then you have this really potent bounce back quite often. Well, what I would say,
I meant more like they think of us as hippies is what I was really saying.
I know. Well, what I would say is, I guess you could ask questions of your dreams. You could ask you could set a task for something to be revealed to you in a dream that you don't know, like the location of something or some information about a period in history or something that you don't know already. Any supplement that works well for memory tends to work really well for lucid dreaming as well. So enhancing your memory and playing memory games. One of the games that I think is very compatible with lucid dreaming is Scrabble. Like playing a lot of Scrabble. My periods of like really active dreaming often correlate with playing a lot of Scrabble, and drawing and writing. So I think when I first was sort of old enough to want to study dreams, when I was very young, I'd go to my local library and I tried to find books about the science of dreams, because that's where I wanted to. That's where I just assumed you would start, is the science of dreams. And then I just discovered there really weren't many books on the science of dreams, and I came to the conclusion that scientists aren't very dreamy people, and they think in a different way, and they think in this material. Because I kind of think, well, if a brain scientist had the sort of dreams that I was having, it would surely be the most interesting thing that the brain does.
Yes.
But I don't find there aren't very many scientists or neuroscientists that study dreaming. But I think it's the hidden path to working out memory and consciousness. If you think that that's a route worth pursuing in the first place, because it certainly can't all be brain based, which I think is the most peculiar thing with scientific studies of consciousness, is that it's all focusing in on the brain. So I would say, one of my recipes for guaranteeing good dreams is watching Jodorowsky's Holy Mountain. We talked about the tarot earlier, and that whole film is like a imaginal journey through the tarot, the major arcana. So if you watch that and you don't have weird dreams, then I would definitely want to talk to you, because I think it's going to work on you. It's psycho magic. Like that's his whole thing, is he creates art to have an effect on the psyche and the unconscious. So watch Jodorowsky's Holy Mountain and come back to me. That's what I would say.
That's great. Yeah. There's a interview with an expert on Jodorowsky on Jeffrey Mishlov's New Thinking Aloud channel. And I bought a couple of his books and I read quite a lot of one of them, and I found him a very interesting man.
Yeah. The films are amazing. They're like so symbolic, and also they have like very intense, sometimes violent, overly sexual, like all those kinds of themes that are triggers for dreaming, like that primal, colorful imagery. And so it really impacts. And because the Holy Mountain is the fool's journey through the major arcana, there are all these very recognizable symbols that your brain just can't help, your mind, your soul just can't help but chew over when you go to sleep on it. So watching that is one of the best recommendations, I think. And then supplements and games or any kinds of activities that help enhance your memory are extremely useful as well. And, obviously for some people, childhood memories can be traumatic or troubling and triggering. So I don't tend to direct people towards that. But if you have a happy memory or you have wonderful memories, then that can also be something that's very useful, because I think that that time, sort of just before you hit puberty, you have this amazing kind of sponge-like ability to pick up information, and you're not really prioritizing or focusing too much. You're just delighting in reality. You know, a puddle is as interesting as a TV show. It's like you're just full of wonder and awe. So trying to recreate that sense of wonder and awe. It's why a lot of people have good dreams when they go on holiday, because they're in a novel environment and they're like suddenly like a road sign looks exotic or interesting, you know. So that can be really useful.
And
as
the
well.
room is clean for the first time in a while.
Oh, that's nice, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, what a beautiful dialogue you and I have had. I'm so grateful. As we close, do you want to share websites, contact, whatever you want to share, maybe anything you've got coming up that you'd like people to know about?
Sure. I've got, I think I've got 4 retreats coming up this year. So, you know, as much as I love writing, I don't really like sitting behind a desk. I like being out in the world. Deal. And I love like following dream inspiration. And if I have a dream about something, I like to do a retreat around it. I feel like it's a kind of divine guidance in some way. So I've got 4 retreats this year. 3 of them are in Greece, and one of them is going to be an oniric odyssey around Anatolia. So I've recently fallen in love with Istanbul, and I'm living in Istanbul, between Istanbul and Greece and England sometimes as well. And I'm running a Dream Hieroglyphics course as well, starting in February. And I am part of a group of organisers for the Delphic Dreaming Symposium in Delphi as well this summer, which is going to be really exciting. And everything that I'm doing, you can find on my website, which is themysteries.org.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. There's still a lot that we haven't covered, so I will tell Penny to put you on the list. We find that to give it a few months between podcasts is the best for listeners, so they are more excited to go into the next episode. I'd love to have you back on again, and Penny will reach out to you. And if you have new and interesting things you want to share from experiences that have happened between now and then, love to get into it. And thank you for writing such a beautiful book and catching my attention, and for sharing this time and space with all of us. And I will close by saying thank you to all of you. I really hope you've enjoyed this journey with Sarah. She's a very fun and interesting woman. And I hope you enjoy her book. I really think it's worth everybody reading. And thank you to our sponsors for all the beautiful products you produce for all of us, for buying your supplies from biodynamic and organic farmers, so each of us can support the farmers by buying from the sponsors of the podcast, and a little goes to support the podcast. So you win, the farmers win, the sponsors win, and I win, and the guests win because they get a chance to share with you. I look forward to sharing something amazing with you next week. And until then, lots of love and sweet dreams. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Paul. It's a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Spirit Gym with Paul Chek and today's guest, Sarah Janes. You can find more from Sarah on her website, themysteries.org, including her Dream Hieroglyphics course. Check out Sarah's book, Initiation into Dream Mysteries, available from Amazon and other good bookstores. If you'd like to join Sarah on her Dreams of Alephsis Dream Retreat in Greece this September and get a £150 discount, email Sarah directly at sarahjanes@themysteries.org for details and mention that you heard her on Paul Chek's podcast. Connect with Sarah on Instagram at Sarah Janes Dreaming, on Facebook at sarah.bohemia, and on YouTube at Sarah Janes Videos. For more interaction with Paul and to share ideas and ask questions about topics discussed in this podcast, we invite you to join his Spirit Gym program and community. You can participate in the live Q&A sessions with his podcast guests, access the members forum within the Spirit Gym community where you can chat with other members, attend weekly virtual meetups with Paul, and study his comprehensive Master Key online program. Explore the options and subscribe today by going to myspiritgym.com. And finally, if you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to the show on the podcast platform of your choice. This podcast is available on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Audible, and YouTube.